The whole thing starts with a dark prophecy, and it all goes down in 10 years. The Federation Kingdom of the East sits right at the center of everything. 5 terrible figures bring chaos across the entire land. They are called the 5 Great Sins, and they destroy everything they touch. The ground splits apart as their power tears through anything and everything in its path. Everything these people know and love is going to fall apart. One man steps forward, and his eyes are burning with a quiet kind of resolve. He has become their patron in order to stop all of this from happening. With that said, though, our boy admits he really was not expecting this whole thing to blow up the way it did. And that is how one man ends up becoming the patron of villains. A tired smile crosses his face as he looks back on his old life. The guy had been a wage slave pulling 70-hour weeks before he ended up possessing a noble in a fantasy world. He asks himself if that is even a good thing, and yeah, it kind of is. Alan picks up a book and has no idea what any of it says. In this world, the young man is completely illiterate and he has no special powers at all. Alan's eyes light up the moment food shows up. A maid tells him the meal is ready, and our boy digs in right away. He says it is absolutely delicious. Then she asks if he is done and offers to help with his bath before bed. Alan freezes up completely when the maids follow him straight into the bath. The guy admits that being a young master of a noble family gives him nothing but uselessness and happiness at the same time. A big grin stretches across Alan's face. He announces that this is the life even though he still has zero idea where he actually is. A maid tells him the young master will be summoned at dawn and that he should sleep early tonight. Alan blinks in confusion and asks who she even is. The maid stares at him and she looks genuinely concerned. She tells him his siblings are Leo and Yuna and asks why he talks as if he does not know his own family. Alan repeats the word Palatio under his breath and something clicks in his head. Why does that name sound so familiar to him? The maid calls after him, but the young man does not answer. His eyes go wide with sudden realization. Is he inside psychedelia right now? The answer is staring him right in the face, and the name is Psychedelia. It is a turn-based RPG. A chill goes down Alan's spine as all the memories come flooding back. He used to play this game whenever he had the time. But no matter which route a player takes, the moment the 5 great sins show up, everything falls apart. Wrath, greed, sloth, pride and obsession. The kingdom and the nobility and the cities, basically everything starts heading toward its downfall, and among all of those, the Palacio house is one of them. The eldest son, Leo Palacio, is known as the king of prostitutes. The second son, Tonio Palacio, is known as the king of drugs. Dread starts building up deep in Alan's gut. The Palacio family is a noble house full of troublemakers, and it exists as a subquest before the main story even begins. Our boy nods slowly and confirms that yes, he does know this place. A subquest about increasing the extra villain's failure index is staring him right in the face. Alan's blood runs cold as the truth sinks in. The Palacios were the first family to get swallowed up and destroyed, and he is Alan Palacio, the extra villain and third son of the Palacio house. The young man stands completely still, and the weight of his fate presses down on him in silence. He is begging to go back to being a 70-hour wage slave. What difference does it make if he is living a life with guaranteed death in 10 years? Pure despair twists across Alan's face. He groans that this is worse than 90% monthly interest on savings. The guy is stuck as a random character with zero combat ability. But then Alan suddenly stops because a thought hits him. He does have a power after all because he knows exactly what happens in 10 years. That kind of knowledge is basically the same as being a prophet. So why not just go ahead and remove the causes of this world's downfall? Determination fills Alan's eyes as a plan starts to take shape in his mind. He decides to reform the 5 great sins for the sake of his peaceful, noble life. It should be totally possible since they are still just kids. Our boy sees absolutely zero problems with this plan. 2 months pass and everything changes. They end up rescuing orphans from an orphanage in the east, and it turns out the place is an illegal human testing center. Evan stands before Alan and gives his report with quiet confidence. He explains that they left the management of the orphanage to a girl named Utia. This is Evan, and he is Alan's personal knight. Alan nods and tells Evan that his eyes are precise and that he is truly skilled at what he does. Evan hesitates for a second. He asks if that was a compliment because he honestly cannot tell from Alan's facial expression. The corner of Alan's mouth twitches into a faint smile. He assures Evan that yes, of course it is, and adds that he looks forward to continuing to work with him. Evan mutters that he does not think he will ever get used to that. Our boy thinks to himself that the original Alan used to be blunt and had no emotions at all. He suspects the possession of this body stopped at the face. Evan thanks him for the praise. Alan reminds himself that Evan is a rare character in psychedelia. Alan's expression softens a bit. Evan is the kind of guy who stays honest and loyal, despite all the betrayals that happen in the game. Then Evan asks if this whole mission was to save the girl named Yutia. Alan gives a simple yes. Evan nods and replies that he can see why. Evan explains that even in his eyes, as someone who worked a long time as a mercenary, she is no ordinary kid at all. Evan's brow furrows and he looks genuinely confused. He says she is strong enough that he cannot understand why she just gave in to being locked up like that. Evan asks why Alan does not just bring her here and keep her close. The young man pauses and admits Evan has a point, but it would look like he is just collecting talented people instead of putting them to use. Leaving her there is actually part of his plan. The truth behind this girl is far worse than Evan knows. This is Yutia Belina, and she is a Memorian child who will sign a contract with a demon from another world for its powers. She goes on to become one of the 5 great sins and kills hundreds of thousands of people. But the current Yutia is not yet someone who would grow up in peace. Our boy thinks to himself that he finally took care of one landmine. Now he just needs to come up with an excuse for Evan. Alan turns to Evan and fumbles his words. He mumbles something along the lines of, "Well, you know." Alan's expression shifts to something serious and hard to read. He tells Evan that it is not yet time. Evan stares at him and repeats those words with a confused look. Alan instructs him to make sure nobody talks to Yutia and to provide them with enough food as well. Evan nods and says he understands. Alan pulls out a letter and tells Evan to give this to Yutia. Evan asks if the letter is important. The guy keeps his tone casual, but there is real intention behind every word. He says it is just to check how she is doing. Might as well reassure her somehow since she has been through a lot. Evan accepts the letter and promises to make sure it reaches her. Alan doubts the letter will actually reassure her, but the real purpose of the letter is something else entirely. He fills it with quotes he remembers hearing dozens of times while playing the game. The game memory plays out clearly in his mind. A suspicious Archbishop NPC recites a spell that is said to befriend the Memorian bloodline, and it happens during a mandatory event. In that event, the Archbishop commands the Sin of Wrath to calm herself, but it always ends the same way during the story progression of the Sin of Wrath. A terrifying figure stands surrounded by crimson power. The Sin of Wrath declares that it is too late. In the game, every single attempt to calm her fails, and the battle begins without mercy. Maybe it is not too late just yet. Since one threat has been handled already, our boy starts thinking about the next target. Alan chuckles to himself with an amused look on his face. He admits it is a bit ridiculous to become a patron just because of some game prophecy. But it might actually work since they worship some god or whatever of the other world. Evan arrives at the orphanage and delivers the letter. He thinks to himself that it is hard to understand the way these people think because they are nothing short of fanatics. The young man stands before Yutia and his senses fire off right away. The mana he can feel coming from her is unbelievable. A chill creeps through Evan despite all his years as a mercenary. He notes that she is a strange child who seems to have no emotions at all. Then Yutia asks if Mr. Allen was the one who sent this letter. Dark energy pulses around Yutia as she waits for an answer. Yutia asks why Allen did not want her by his side. Evan freezes up and starts stammering. Evan's eyes blow wide with fear because Yutia's mana becomes visible to the naked eye. He realizes that manifesting mana in this form is only possible at the Master Realm. Yutia reads the letter and speaks. It is not yet time. Evan collects himself and stutters out a response. He tells Yutia that it is not yet time just as Allen instructed. Yutia goes quiet for a long moment. She simply says she sees. Something stirs behind Yutia's eyes for the very first time as she reads the letter. She recognizes the words inside. This is a promise that only her master would know. She gets it now and understands exactly what he means. This right here is Yutia, the Sin of Wrath, the daughter of monsters and the Bloody Queen. She has found her master. Meanwhile, a calm night settles quietly over the Palatio estate. Our boy stretches out under the moonlight without a care in the world. He managed to extend his luxurious lifespan a little bit. Even the bright moon seems to be cheering him on. He promises to work hard on the next kid as well. Alan flips through the books in the library looking for something specific. A heavy volume slips off the shelf and nearly hits him on the way down. He clicks his tongue and mutters that it is not here after all. Then Evan walks in and reports that they have rescued the second child Alan mentioned. Relief washes over Alan's face right away. He asks Evan if he made sure to treat the child very kindly. Evan assures him that of course he did after saving the child from the illegal slave market. A mocking voice cuts through the room out of nowhere. This is Tonio, and he is the second son of the Palladio County. The guy greets Alan with a sneer on his face. Tonio's lips twist into a cruel grin. He asks why an illiterate guy like Alan would even be in a library. Then he adds that he heard Alan has been studying recently. Tonio steps closer and demands that Alan answer his brother right now. This guy is barely even a brother to begin with. Our boy is wondering how the original Alan used to deal with this kind of thing. He wants to strike back, but he holds himself. Alan swallows his anger and keeps a straight face. He tells Tonio that it seems he wants to use the library, so he will take his leave. Tonio scoffs and tells him he knows his place. A cold voice slices through the tension. Someone calls them insects and tells them they are being too noisy. Tonio freezes on the spot. A dangerous aura fills the room as a man steps forward. This is Leo Palladio, and he is the first son of the Palladio County. He warns them that he does not want blood first thing in the morning, and that they should get lost. Alan tries to explain that he is looking for something from the Palladio archives, but Leo cuts him off and calls him a dunce and tells him to get lost while he still can. The Palladio County disappeared really quickly in the game. Alan realizes he needs to investigate the real Palacios far more carefully than he originally thought. Alarm creeps across Alan's face as the pieces fall into place. The brothers are far more powerful than he expected. They are fighting over the family head position, and one runs the prostitution empire from the shadows while the other manages the drug cartel. Our boy decides he cannot mess with these two at all. Getting involved with either of them would cost him his sweet noble life. He makes up his mind right then and there. He is going to quietly live as a weak and incompetent bastard child, and nothing is going to change that. A sudden commotion disrupts Alan's quiet routine. Someone stumbles toward him with an urgent report. A servant mentions something about Tonio and the second son being gone. Alan barely responds with a drowsy murmur. Evan is quietly asking himself how someone like Alan managed to find out about the illegal slave market and the secret bio-experiments happening in a completely different region. Concern flickers across Evan's face. He notes that Alan seems to have a hard time keeping himself together. The young man mumbles that he is just so tired. Evan remarks that the young master is quite strange. He points out that Alan sent the child straight to the orphanage. Alan simply responds with a quiet confirmation. Alan recalls that Evan mentioned the child is far from ordinary. This kid is not just uncommon, but of a completely cataclysmic scale. The weight of it all sinks in as Alan considers the bigger picture. Within a united kingdom composed of several nations, its central nation is the Callian Kingdom. The child they rescued from the illegal slave market is none other than Deus Macallian, and he is the second boss of Psychedelia. Deus was sold into slavery and abused as he got passed from place to place with no end in sight. What Deus becomes later on is truly horrifying. He grows to become one of the 5 great sins known as the sin of sloth, and then he annihilates the kingdoms in the most horrific ways anyone could imagine. The destruction Deus causes in the game is so vile that even the players behind their screens are shaken to the core by what they see. Alan explains that this is exactly why he told Evan to treat Deus very kindly. As for why he sent him to the orphanage, it is not yet time. Evan nods with quiet understanding. He says he expected as much. Then he asks if the letter Alan sent to Utia is about the second child. Alan admits that yes, the letter does mention the second child. He adds that there is some small talk in it as well. The guy explains that he told Utia to take care of this slightly sick child he sent her way. Utia stands before Deus and fixes her gaze directly on him. She speaks a single chilling word and points right at him. Utia tells Deus that he is broken. She can see the traces of something dark lingering on him. Deus stares back at her with completely hollow eyes, and there is no sign of life in them at all. Recognition flashes in Utia's crimson eyes. She asks if it was the black goat that left these marks on him. Utia tells Deus that the Great Moon has still chosen him despite everything, and she congratulates him on that. She instructs him to feel the power he has been given and let his potential be fully unleashed. Utia's red eyes glow with fierce intensity as she makes him a promise. If he stays loyal and follows his master's orders, then everything will be worth it. He is going to have his revenge. Utia turns away from Deus and decides it is time to send her first reply to Alan. A gentle calm settles over Utia's face under the soft glow of the moon. She will start with a light greeting first. The letter rests beneath the moonlight, and it is ready to begin a long exchange between master and servant. In the villa, Alan mutters to himself about where the third boss could possibly be. Then someone bursts through the door, screaming about big trouble. A servant catches himself mid-sentence as panic takes over. He starts to call Tonio scum, but then quickly corrects himself to the second young master. Alan looks up in surprise. The servant blurts out that Tonio is dead. Our boy blinks once and asks if Tonio is dead already. He is more surprised by the timing than the news itself. Exhaustion and boredom wash over Alan at the funeral. People murmur their respects around the coffin, but all the young man can think about is how bored and hungry he is. This family was always messed up. This is a dark fantasy genre through and through. He considers the official cause of death, which is an accidental fall, but something about it feels different from what he remembers in the game. Alan's mind drifts back to the game. In the game version, Leo kills Tunio after years of fighting for the family head position. Leo practically celebrated when it was done. Alan glances sideways at Leo. The guy could at least try to hide his satisfaction. It was clearly either Leo or his followers who did this, but Alan just shrugs it off and moves on. Our boy walks away from the funeral and refocuses. He just has to resolve the 5 great sins and keep his peaceful life intact. A year passes without incident. With the successor problem solved and Leo having absorbed the drug business, everything changes. The county becomes even more peaceful than before. In the meantime, Alan and Utia become pen pals. Keeping in touch with her is going to prove helpful in the future for sure. A warm smile crosses Alan's face as he reads the latest letter. They really are good kids when you look at them like this. Alan notices that the list of underground information has increased again. He finds it interesting that anyone can dig up this kind of intelligence. He admits it is a good thing regardless. Then he remembers the list he has been searching for all this time. Evan steps forward with something promising in his voice. He reports that the Information Guild has finally found a clue. Our boy perks up right away. He says that is a relief and guesses it must be an ancient book about the third boss. He is thrilled to finally track that one down as well. Alan's everyday life is peaceful and uneventful, and that is exactly the way he likes it. But then a distant scream tears through the quiet. Alada! At a drug distribution site called Margent, 2 dealers chat casually. One mentions that the eldest Palacio is quite generous. The other brags that their organization now has a few hundred members. A voice whispers that it is just a bit more. The dealers barely register the warning before an unseen force strikes without mercy. One dealer shrieks in terror as a figure comes down on them from the shadows above. Fear grips every person in the room as the attackers tear through the operation without a single moment of hesitation. The dealers scream for help, but no one comes. Their cries fade into silence as the building crumbles around them. Utia observes the aftermath with a calm expression on her face. She remarks that she enjoyed the puppet show of the sin and notes there is still more to take care of. Deus looks back at Utia with hollow doubt in his eyes. He asks if there is any real point in doing all of this. Utia turns to face him and her expression is perfectly still and unreadable. She asks if he pities them. Deus replies that no, he does not, because they use people to create drugs. He just does not see how any of this connects to his revenge. Utia's voice drops to a tone of absolute certainty. She tells him that of course it does. Every base used to create drugs needs to be completely removed. She asks how they can possibly let the land remain soiled when their master arrives. Deus goes silent for a long moment before he finally responds. He quietly replies that he understands what must be done. Power erupts from both of them as they get ready to finish what they started. Utia declares that everything will proceed according to his will. Under the light of the crescent moon, Utia announces that they, the blue moon, shall be his sword. The blue moon emblem glows beneath the endless night sky, and it stands as a silent promise of loyalty to come. 2 whole years have gone by since Alan and Utia started exchanging letters. Someone is running around calling his name in a panic, trying to find him. Evan finally catches up and spots Alan just sitting in the backyard relaxing like he has zero worries in the world. Our boy looks up with this calm little smile and greets Evan like nothing is going on. Evan tells him the 5th child has been sent to the orphanage successfully. Over these 2 years, Alan managed to save all 3 of the remaining sins. Every single one of them is now safe and living at the orphanage under Utia's watch. Alan pushes a plate of food toward someone and tells them to eat. The person curses at him quietly under their breath. The guy feels a wave of relief wash through him. He had some real trouble tracking down the 3rd sin, but making Evan do the legwork using his game knowledge paid off in the end. Alan tells Evan he did good work on everything and that he can go rest now. Evan asks if that is seriously all Alan has to say about welcoming the child to the orphanage. Alan's face stays completely flat and he says, yeah, that is pretty much it. Evan tries to say something more, but he just trails off. Evan asks if Alan is not happy about it. Alan says he is perfectly happy. Evan tells him he does not look happy at all. Alan claims he is smiling right now. Evan just sighs and says, fine, they will go with that. He doesn't realize that he is smiling until Evan points it out and openly admits it. Our boy stretches tiredly, then lies down on the ground. Our boy thinks to himself that he really did not expect things to go this smoothly. It starts to sink in slowly what he actually pulled off. The bosses of psychedelia became the 5 sins because of the horrible things that happened to them growing up. Even though this is the past, and before they became the sins, the chances of saving all of them before those terrible events happened were incredibly low. He was genuinely scared that he would find them only after they had already been broken beyond any kind of repair. Alan puts the heavy thoughts aside and asks Evan how the orphanage is doing these days. Evan reports that everything over there is going well as usual. Evan remembers how the children looked like broken dolls when they first came to the orphanage. A small bit of warmth shows on Evan's usually stone-cold face. He adds that the kids have lightened up a lot since those early days. Alan nods and figures they probably will not need to hire a separate caretaker after all. He admits he really did not expect Utia to do such a good job with them. He wonders if maybe her connection to the orphanage comes from something in her own past. Alan reads the newest letter and says that Utia is actually quite a nice girl in her own way. Evan asks if the letter has anything important in it. Alan holds the pages up so Evan can see for himself. The letter says the last child is growing well and there is no need to worry about Deus. Alan smiles and says he is just glad to see them all growing up nicely. Seeing that kind of progress proves everything they went through was worth it. Evan asks when Alan plans on actually going to meet the kids. He reminds him that Alan always keeps saying the time will come eventually. Alan goes quiet for a long moment. Then he drops the truth and admits he does not plan on ever meeting them. He explains that while it would be nice to stay close, the sins do not exactly have the kind of personalities he wants to deal with for the rest of his life. The process that turns the children into the sins in the game is horrific enough on its own. The guy is honestly a bit too scared to face them in person. He mumbles something about maybe considering it in 5 years. Evan just accepts the answer and moves on. Alan changes the subject and says that either way he needs to get strong enough to protect himself in this dark fantasy world. He has no talent and no magic, and his body has nothing going for it at all. Evan pauses for a second and asks Alan if he has ever heard of something called the Blue Moon. Alan stares at Evan with a blank face. He has never heard of them before in his life. Evan explains that the Blue Moon is an organization that has been going around taking out criminal rings and cleaning up illegal operations across the underground. Our boy's face drains of color instantly. He never expected to hear something like that. Alan grabs Evan by the shoulder and his eyes go dead serious. He tells Evan to start sleeping in the room next to his from tonight. Evan nods calmly and suggests they just go over this week's reports instead. Far from the Palacio estate, a meeting begins. Utia asks for the report on the north. A confident figure steps forward with a big bold grin on her face. She brags that she took every single one of the slave traders' heads and not a single one got away. This is Seirong, the sin of pride. Seirong grins even wider as she gives her report. She adds that nobody could figure out who she was. Someone nearby compliments her combat outfit, and another voice points out that she never leaves anyone breathing. A quieter voice speaks up and reports that every corpse from the operation has been completely melted away without a trace. This is Rin, the sin of greed. Another member speaks up and says he finished the South as well. He took care of the illegal human testing grounds that were still running in that region. There is a cold satisfaction in his voice as he says he turned the Avalon bastards who kept causing trouble into minced meat. This is Radon, the sin of mysophobia. Utia nods and declares that all things will go according to his will. They exist for the sake of the Great Moon. This is the Blue Moon, a secret organization that worships the Great Moon. However, Utia pauses and says it appears they have a problem. One member asks what could possibly go wrong when everything is perfect under his will. Then another raises the point that Alan lives under the eldest son of the Count family. A member says he found a dangerous written order while cleaning up the South. The eldest son appears to be directly targeting Alan. Utia's eyes go wide with shock and disbelief when she hears this. Her expression changes from shock to something much darker. She says quietly that she sees. Dark energy starts pouring out of Utia, and her anger takes a physical form around her body. The power gets stronger and stronger until the air feels heavy with raw killing intent. The letter says that they need to slowly poison Alan after the Count dies. Utia's mana erupts in a huge wave that shakes the entire room. Nobody dares to move or say a word. 2 more years pass. Our boy's world changes when his father, Count Palatio, dies. His death is officially ruled as heart failure, but the real truth underneath is far more ugly. It clearly happened because of Leo's obsession with power and his ruthless push to take the family head position. Back at the estate, someone mentions that the blue moon struck again. Another person confirms they hit just last night. Worry fills the faces of everyone left standing. It seems like anyone who has gotten close to the organization just vanishes. The blue moon appears to be going specifically after people connected to Leo's network and the criminal underworld. And so the Count's death passes without a single person mourning him. It all ends in total silence. Evan asks Alan what he plans to do now that Leo is about to take full control of the family. Alan is already throwing stuff into bags. Evan freezes mid-sentence and asks what all the luggage is about. Alan tells him to get his things packed without wasting another second. Evan's jaw drops when Alan says they are going to run. Evan asks in total disbelief if Alan is seriously planning to leave the estate behind. The guy clarifies that it is not permanent. They are heading south to a small town called Rodmill that sits just below the Palacio territory. He has been planning this move for a long time already. Alan has been planning to leave for a small town to the south of Palacio called Rodmill. A stranger stands on one of the upper floors, looking down with eyes full of killing intent. The next morning he makes a simple breakfast of eggs on toast, and he savors every single bite of it. Evan watches from the side as our boy settles into this new life with surprising energy and zero complaints about anything. Then in just 3 days everything changes again. Alan returns to the Palatio estate, and the look on his face makes it clear he did not come back by choice. Disbelief fills his entire face. It is now his brother's funeral. He cannot believe he is standing here again so soon. He notices something strange about the timing. Leo dies at a completely different point compared to the game. He wonders why Leo is already gone this early. The cause of death is a single stab wound right through the heart. Alan thinks to himself that it was a clean and precise kill. He wonders who could have possibly done this to Leo. He tries to ask someone about the cause of death, but before he can even finish the sentence, something interrupts him. A servant drops to the ground and starts apologizing over and over for ever laughing at Alan in the past. The people around the estate stare and whisper among themselves. Everyone seems confused by the sudden change in how people are treating Alan now. He wonders what is wrong with everyone. Evan walks up to Alan quietly and calls for his attention in a serious tone. Alan asks if Evan managed to find out anything about the situation. Evan takes a second to gather his words before responding. Evan looks Alan straight in the eyes and asks him one question. He asks if Alan is the one who made Avalon vanish overnight. Our boy's jaw drops as the question hits him completely out of nowhere. He stares at Evan in total shock and confusion. Not long ago, on the day Alan sets off for Rodmill, a carriage rolls down the road away from the Palacio estate. Evan asks his young master if it would not be better to go to a city instead. Alan hums and thinks about it for a second. Alan's face lights up and he refuses without even thinking twice. He insists that Rodmill is the final destination he has planned, and there is absolutely no changing his mind about it. Our boy thinks to himself that by saving the 5 great ones from misfortune, his plan is nearly complete now. He adds that stopping the world from ruin is the last piece of the puzzle he needs to solve. Pure joy fills Alan's face and he breaks into a loud laugh. He can already picture the peaceful life that is waiting for him on the other side. Alan explains that Rodmill has nothing to do with the original story at all. The Palacio Villa is there too, and it is the perfect place for a noble to settle in safely while doing absolutely nothing. He proudly declares that everything has a reason behind it. Evan just stares at him with a dead serious expression on his face. Evan's patience runs out and his tone drops cold. He tells Alan he cannot fool him anymore and that he always says those kinds of things when he does not want to explain himself. Alan shrugs the whole thing off and says good things are great. Evan mutters that the deflection came quick as always. From high up on a balcony, Leo watches the carriage disappear down the road in complete silence. A dark look settles over Leo's eyes as he stands at the railing. He wonders to himself whether he should just go ahead and kill Alan or not. Leo figures it does not really matter if Alan is alive or dead. He was already planning to kill him with poison after their father's death either way. Leo recalls that Alan said he would not object and would leave for the countryside on his own. He figures there is no reason to kill him now. Irritation creases Leo's brow and he falls silent for a long moment. He lets out a low hum under his breath. Leo wonders if it is because matters with Avalon are not going well. Alan just bothers him for some reason. Leo calls out for Alman. He orders him to follow the carriage. Cold tension fills Alman's eyes as he appears from the shadows. He asks if that means Leo wants him to kill Alan. This is Alman, a subordinate who works directly for Leo. Leo snaps back with a sharp look and demands to know what Alman means by that. Leo thinks to himself that Alman has never once talked back to him no matter what kind of orders he gives. Suspicion shows in Leo's gaze as he stares at Alman standing still in the hallway. He wonders why Alman is suddenly asking questions now. Leo scoffs and tells Alman it is his job to follow orders without question. Before Leo even finishes his sentence, a blade drives straight through his chest. Leo screams out in agony. Blood drains from Leo's face as rage and disbelief twist his expression. He demands to know how Alman dares to betray him like this. Eden stares down at Leo with calm, emotionless eyes under the moonlit sky. He tells Leo it was fun up until now. This is Haydn, a member of the Blue Moon who spent 2 whole years undercover pretending to be Alman. Haydn's voice carries the weight of a creed passed down by the first moon. He says that as the Blue Moon they do not swing their swords just because of orders alone. It is only natural that he made a choice on his own. Haydn grips his bloodied sword and warns that if anyone tries to harm the Great Moon, then the consequences are absolute. Haydn slashes his blade through the air with deadly force. The strike tears across Leo's body and blood sprays into the air. Haydn declares that he can act on his own accord whenever he needs to. Leo collapses, and he is gasping and choking on his own blood. Haydn tells Leo that is the reason he waited for him to give the order. He adds that to think it took Leo 2 whole years to finally say those words. Fury and desperation burn in Leo's dying eyes. He gasps that his subordinates will not let Haydn get away with this. Haydn responds that with those very words, Avalon will disappear from this continent forever. Haydn turns his back and tells Leo it is unfortunate for him. Standing beneath a crescent moon, Haydn murmurs that the Great Moon gave Leo a chance. Leo never understood what that meant. A bright smile breaks across our boy's face as he stretches his arms wide in the morning sun. He cheerfully says good morning to nobody in particular. Alan declares that Rodmill is heaven. It is another peaceful day, and he gets to wake up whenever he wants. He happily announces that he eats whatever he feels like eating. Alan savors every bite of his food, and the bliss on his face is obvious. He says that he is finally able to live the life of a true noble. The guy chews on his toast and wonders out loud if maybe he should open up a toast stand somewhere. Evan walks in and tells Alan he has a letter. Alan looks up and hums with mild curiosity. Alan's brow raises with sudden interest as he opens the envelope. He asks what this is about. The toast slips right out of Alan's hand and crashes to the floor as the contents of the letter sink in. The letter tells him that due to Leo Palatio's death, the estate requests Alan Palatio's immediate return. Our boy groans that his free trial of heaven expired after just 4 days. Disbelief is written all over Alan's face as he walks back through the estate gates. He says to himself that he returned to the Palatio estate just like that. Alan stops in his tracks and notices every servant and knight avoiding his gaze. He blurts out in confusion and asks what is wrong with all of their reactions. Evan approaches with a grave expression and asks when his young master became the shadow leader. Alan freezes completely and lets out a confused "huh?" The guy's mind spirals as the absurdity of it all hits him at once. This has to be some kind of crazy circumstances simulation gone horribly wrong. Alan grabs his head and asks Evan to please just explain why everyone is treating him like some kind of villain. Evan lays it out plainly. Alan is the only person who benefits from this whole situation. After they left the estate, Leo was murdered, and Alan has the perfect alibi to become the heir now. Worry shows on Evan's face as he keeps going. Avalon is gone now, and with Leo dead, nothing in the underworld is going to bother Alan ever again. Both of them go silent as the weight of that conclusion just hangs in the air between them. The implication is obvious to anyone looking at it. Evan spells the whole thing out. Alan is the shadow leader of the Count family, who orchestrated the assassination of his own brother. Then he asks Alan if he is having fun with all of this. Exhaustion and disbelief wash over Alan's face and he lets out a long sigh. He groans about where he should even begin with this, and asks if people really believe his so-called organization can wipe out an underworld boss overnight. Alan pauses and recalls something. He asks Evan about an organization that specializes in secret operations. Evan asks if he means the Blue Moon. Alan nods and wonders if they could be the ones behind all of this. Evan shakes his head and explains that the Information Guild already ruled out the Blue Moon. They always leave behind a mark instead of a full corpse when they do their work. Shock registers on Alan's face as Evan describes the massacre. Evan calls it a road to hell. Alan mutters that he now understands why people think he commands a swordmaster. Alan thinks to himself that the Blue Moon does not appear in the game at all. There are only traces here and there suggesting they made certain groups vanish before the original story begins. Alan grits his teeth and demands to know who the hell is responsible for all of this. Deep below the Eastern Orphanage, Utia opens the meeting with a single question. She asks if any traces remain from the operation. Rina reports that nothing was left behind. Seerong chimes in with a grin on her face and announces the same result on her end too. Deus lets out a quiet laugh and notes that there are only corpses left now. A cold presence enters the room as Radon returns. He announces that he is back. Radon stands before the group and reports that 486 soldiers of Avalon remained when he got there. He adds that he did exactly what the boss told him to do. A faint gleam of satisfaction crosses Radon's sharp eyes. He states plainly that he cut every single one of them in half. Utia nods and says good. Utia declares the result perfect. And just like that, Avalon, the massive organization that once dominated the Asteria kingdom, meets its end. The whole thing turns to dust in just 5 days. Radon's expression shifts and he tells Utia he does not think the cleanup was actually perfect. She asks what he means by that. Radon explains that he found additional nobles with deep ties to Avalon while sweeping through the remains of the organization. He presents the evidence and reveals that the Altia Dukedom has a particularly deep connection to Avalon specifically. Utia's red eyes narrow as she silently studies the document in front of her. A heavy stillness fills the entire room. Utia lifts her gaze and tells everyone they already know what she is going to say. Dark energy ripples around her body as she speaks. Radon nods without any hesitation and promises to take care of it quietly. Radon's power surges outward as he prepares to carry out the order. A small note mentions that Rodmill is a warm village with a mild climate all year round. Utia closes her eyes and lets out a slow breath. The dark energy around her fades away. She opens her eyes and asks one last thing. She wants to know if the Information Guild side is clean. Rin's face shows satisfaction as she confirms the matter is being handled separately from the Blue Moon. Siarang waves a document around with a proud grin on her face. Rin adds that all the guilds are saying the same thing. They are calling the massacre the work of a swordmaster's hell sword. She asks if she should keep watching the movement. Yutia nods and says yes. She makes it clear that this matter must never reach the ears of that person. She reminds them she has said this countless times already. Deus's expression shifts and he points out that the person's family targeted them first. He argues this is not about following some order. Yutia's red eyes flash with intensity. She declares that they are swords and a sword must not think for itself. Yutia continues that the blue moon must only move on orders. She tells them to remember that the great moon knows everything. Her voice drops low as she warns them to never disappoint him. Confusion fills Deus's face and he admits he does not understand any of it. He wonders out loud how someone with abilities as overwhelming as Yutia's could possibly feel this way. Deus cannot wrap his head around why she feels anxiety and restlessness simply because she is afraid of being discovered. After a long pause, Deus lowers his head and says he understands. Everything is for the great moon and for their cause. Exhaustion drags across Alan's face and he groans that he cannot take any more of this. He slumps over a huge pile of documents on the desk. Alan complains that after the funeral, a full month of endless duties keeps him completely buried. He whines that he just wants to loaf around and eat like a real noble is supposed to. Even though he has enemies now, Leo's death is supposed to happen 6 years from this point in the game. But because both brothers died and the course of events changed, all the backlog of family duties falls onto him as the only heir left. Servants drop to the ground and greet him with trembling voices. Alan lets out an exhausted sigh. He wonders why everyone acts so scared around him all the time. The servants whisper among themselves and ask each other if the new master is angry. Worry spreads across the servants' faces, and they ask each other if they need to work even harder. One of them mutters quietly that he does not want to. Alan figures the staff must be working this hard because they believe he is some kind of secret mastermind. He wishes they would just manage things normally and stop trying so hard to impress him. Evan walks up and tells Alan that it is honestly pretty astonishing what he has accomplished so far. 3 small spheres of mana spin around in Alan's palm as he shows off his control. The orbs orbit smoothly without a single wobble. Evan explains that it is quite rare for someone to reach the 2nd tier in just 2 years without any formal instruction. Normally it takes about 4 years under a proper master to get there. He adds that magic also requires innate talent in many cases. Alan hums and agrees that his talent is pretty decent overall. Alan mentions that he practices hard for self-defense because he feels uneasy living in this dangerous world. Our boy's expression turns serious as the reality of his situation weighs on him more and more. Alan explains that real control means being able to manipulate mana precisely, but then he asks what good any of it is if his skills are only half-baked at the end of the day. He mentions that he has tried every single method available in this world already. Alan recalls that at first learning magic was exciting to him. He figures the plan will work out fine, and there will not be anything too dangerous. He tells himself he will just slowly learn more as time goes on. Frustration twists across Alan's face as the truth hits him hard. Now that he is desperate to protect himself, he realizes his mana haul is insanely tiny. The guy hangs his head in defeat and mutters that nothing is working out for him. He compares innate mana capacity to an athlete's natural height class. It is just something a person is born with and cannot change. Alan admits that his own mana haul is very small. He repeats with growing despair that it is very, very small. A flicker of determination crosses Alan's eyes. He thinks that if nothing else works, there is still one method left he can try. Then something catches his attention. Evan mentions that the invitation to the ball has finally arrived. Alan blinks and asks what ball Evan is talking about. Alan and Evan arrive at the midsummer ball in the southern region of the kingdom. Our boy sighs and admits he is already tired before it even starts. He figures that since he is about to become a count soon, he should use this chance to make some connections. Our boy sighs and admits he is already tired before it even starts. He figures that since he is about to become a count soon, he should use this chance to make some connections. Alan reminds himself that forming connections with other nobles is going to be crucial for a peaceful future. But the moment Alan steps into the ballroom, the whole mood in the room shifts. Nobles glance at him once and quickly look the other way. Alan puts on his most serious face and gets ready to socialize. Evan watches from behind and asks what exactly he is doing. Every noble in the room gives Alan and Evan a wide berth. Alan just stands there in the center of the empty floor and says nothing at all. Then they all run away when they see them. Evan tries to calm Alan down, but before he can even finish speaking, Alan starts laughing. Evan can only stare at him in silence. Alan thinks this is exactly what he expects and says goodbye to Evan before heading somewhere else. He knows the nobles look down on him because he comes from a lower class and lacks the refinement they value so highly. He realizes that unlike what he expected, the Palatio family name carries far more weight than he thought. The family is known everywhere as a household full of troublemakers from the East. Alan clenches his jaw and reminds himself that he did not come here without a plan. He decides to put the social skills he has been practicing to good use. Our boy approaches a young noblewoman with a glass of wine in hand and casually notes that the aroma is quite unique. Alan keeps a gentle smile on his face, knowing it is an essential tool for making good impressions on people. The young lady panics on the spot and says she will tell her father to prepare bottles for him right away. The gossip spreads fast through the room. Someone mutters that the Palatio family turns out to be far more monstrous than anyone thought. Alan stands there alone with his wine glass and mutters to himself that he even studied wine specifically for this moment. Bitter realization washes over Alan's face. He finally understands just how badly damaged the Palatio name truly is. The rumor that Alan murdered his own monstrous brothers has spread through every noble circle in the entire kingdom by now. Alan admits to himself that he has become someone everybody avoids on sight. His social life is completely and totally ruined. He lets out a quiet hum and just stares off into the distance. Through the roses and candlelight, a stunning girl with flowing red hair catches his eye from across the room. Alan walks out the balcony for a rest. Alan wonders where things went so wrong for him. Then a soft voice cuts through the silence and asks if he has a moment to spare. Alan freezes in surprise. Someone is actually talking to him right now. Curiosity fills his eyes as he turns around and wonders who it could possibly be. Alan turns to face the voice with a guarded expression on his face. A girl in a green dress stands right in front of him and introduces herself. She says her name is Loria, and that she is the third daughter of Duke Altia. This is Loria of the Altia family. Alan's eyes narrow the moment the name registers in his head. The Altia name explains a lot already. He greets her politely. Alan recalls that the Altia family is one of the 3 major shadow players in psychedelia. They are known all throughout the North as troublemakers. He concludes there is no way she is a normal person given her family background. Suspicion sharpens Alan's gaze as one thought keeps nagging at him. He wonders why he cannot remember this girl from anywhere in the game. Alan thinks to himself that Loria does not appear anywhere in the game's story at all. Loria cuts straight to the point and tells Alan she is going to be blunt with him. She asks him to lend her his strength. Her voice drops to barely a whisper, and she reveals that she is going to be assassinated soon. The weight of those words just hangs in the air between them. A small note mentions that the Altia Dukedom is one of the 3 shadow player families of Asteria. Loria looks Alan straight in the eyes and asks him to lend her his strength. She tells him that she is going to be assassinated soon. Alan hums quietly as her words sink in. Loria explains that she is the only daughter of the Duke's concubine. Her older sisters are going to kill her once the Duke passes away. Alan thinks to himself that Loria's situation is basically a mutual downfall scenario. He wonders why someone who is not even in the game is coming up to him at the ball asking for help. Desperation fills Loria's voice, and she insists that with Alan's power he could easily protect her from all of it. Alan shakes his head and tells Loria he has to decline. Loria quickly adds that she is not asking for help with nothing to offer in return. She offers up half of the entire Altia family fortune in exchange for his protection, but Alan's resolve does not change one bit. Alan tells Loria that even with that kind of offer he will be taking his leave now. He turns and starts walking away. Our boy thinks to himself that he can barely take care of his own life right now. There is no way he is in any position to help someone else on top of that. Even if he wants to help, it would be unwise to involve himself with a powerful noble family right from the start. The risks outweigh anything she could possibly offer him. Loria stands there in silence as Alan walks away from her. She does not say a single word. Alan pauses mid-step and glances back at her. He tells Loria that he still wishes her good luck with everything. He adds that he hopes she finds a reliable ally out there. Then he disappears back into the ballroom crowd. Alan murmurs one last word of encouragement before leaving Loria behind on the terrace by herself. High above on the rooftop, two Blue Moon members are watching everything unfold below. One of them notes that an Altia has approached the Great Moon. The first observer suggests they should pass her information along to the Red Moon as well. The second one shakes his head and says there is no need for that. According to their intel, Loria is the only Altia who is not tied to any criminal operations. She is not one of Radon's targets. That makes things simple. The rest of the Altia family will be dealt with on schedule. They will proceed according to the Red Moon's command as planned. The observers agree to focus on blocking information so the Avalon case never reaches Alan's ears. Alan wanders back through the ball and wonders if he just scared off another dangerous person. Then a cheerful voice calls out to him with a hello. Alarm flickers across Alan's eyes as a stunning woman in red walks up to him. He stammers a hello back at her. Alan's mind starts racing as he realizes this is yet another shadow player standing right in front of him. He greets her by name and says hello to Lady Zenonia. The woman with the fiery red hair smiles warmly at the recognition. She asks if he really knows who she is. Alan explains that of course he does. In the Asteria Kingdom there are 3 great shadow players. He begins to list them off: Altia of the North, Palatia of the East, and Zenonia the Troublemaker of the West. Alan figures that while Palatio runs more of a gang operation, Zenonia operates like a smartly run criminal syndicate. This is Philea, the eldest daughter of Count Zenonia. Cold sweat builds on the guy's face as he realizes what he needs to do here. He tells himself that for the sake of his peaceful life he must never get involved with this woman no matter what. Alan thinks carefully about what he actually needs right now. Normal connections for a stable, noble life are what matter most. He puts on his best smile and compliments Philea by telling her she looks beautiful tonight. Philea thanks him with a pleased smile on her face. She says she would love to talk more and asks if he is interested. Alan politely declines and notes there are too many eyes on them right now. Philea's eyes narrow for just a moment. Then she smiles again and says he is just as the rumors describe him. She tells him she looks forward to seeing him again sometime and walks away. Alan stares after her with a puzzled look on his face. He wonders what she means by all of that. Alan watches Philea leave and mutters that he has no idea what any of that was about. He shakes off the thought and turns his attention to other things. Back up on the rooftop, the Blue Moon observers continue their watch. One of them reports that the Avalon case information ring will stay active for now, but a new concern comes up. The other observer spots something troubling. A figure dressed in black is quietly tailing Alan through the crowd below. Tension rises between the two watchers. They wonder if they should step in and do something, but Utia's orders are clear on this. They agree to keep watching for now. If the tail does not pose any immediate threat, they will simply track the figure and take care of it later. Weeks later, deep in a forest south of Estrovan, Evan asks Alan if he is sure this is the right place. A small canyon ahead is strangely dark even though it is the middle of the day. Excitement sparks behind our boy's calm expression. He finally found what he is really looking for. He whispers to himself that if this one turns out empty again, he might actually cry. Then he catches himself and says no, this time it is the real thing. Alan admits that in the game the labyrinth is easy enough to find. The real reason he comes all the way out to Estrovan is not the ball at all. It is because the Labyrinth of Whispers is located here. In the Labyrinth of Whispers, solving the riddles in all 8 rooms gives you a powerful artifact as a reward. Alan has every single one of those puzzles memorized from his countless playthroughs of Psychedelia over the years. Seeing the labyrinth for the first time in real life feels completely different from the game. The oppressive darkness presses in on them the moment they step inside. Glowing runes line the walls of the first room. Alan walks forward without hesitation while the dungeon's heavy energy weighs down on Evan behind him. Evan marvels at how different the real dungeon feels compared to what Alan described before. Every shadow in this place carries a sense of real danger. Evan demands to know how Alan even knows this place exists in the first place. Alan casually says he has been here plenty of times before. Evan freezes and asks what he means by that. Alan catches himself and says he is just kidding. He tells Evan he has his ways and to just keep moving. Evan mutters that Alan should not joke around with such a serious face like that. Inside the labyrinth, a massive creature gets crushed under a stone ceiling. The traps for wrong answers are brutally lethal in here. Evan watches the monster die in horror. It hits him that if they answer a single riddle wrong, the exact same thing happens to them. Evan cannot understand how Alan stays so calm in a place like this. He stares at his master with a mix of fear and admiration on his face. Over the past 4 years, Evan handled every task Alan assigned to him. Saving orphans and shutting down criminal operations and delivering mysterious messages. Yet none of it ever reveals who Alan truly is as a person. Alan barely leaves the estate his entire life, and yet he knows the inner workings of this ancient labyrinth as if he built the whole thing himself. Despite all the questions that remain unanswered, every task Alan assigns leads to a good outcome in the end. That trust alone is enough for Evan to keep following him. Evan asks what exactly Alan is planning this time around. Alan offers no explanation at all and simply keeps moving forward. The final door swings open and light pours in from the other side. Evan nearly collapses with relief and says he almost breaks his neck trying not to look at the traps back there. Alan walks up to a small table at the very end of the labyrinth. A plain ring sits in the center of it, looking completely unremarkable. Evan glances around the room and remarks that the ring honestly looks like the most useless thing in here. Alan picks up the ring without any hesitation and says they can leave everything else behind. This ring is the only thing he comes here for. Relief washes over Alan, and he murmurs that he finally got his hands on the oath of restraint. He tells Evan there should be no monsters on the way back out. Evan lets out a big sigh of relief at that. As they make their way out of the canyon, Evan suddenly freezes in his tracks. He calls out to Alan with urgency in his voice. Dozens of golems stand in formation, blocking the exit completely. Evan draws his sword and asks if Alan somehow sees this coming too. Alan realizes the rock piles they pass on the way in are actually golems sitting there the whole time. He notes that a few of them look particularly dangerous. This is the worst-case scenario playing out. Alan steps forward and tells Evan he will handle this one himself. Evan stares at him in total disbelief. The golems charge all at once. Alan knows that no matter what happens, securing an escape route has to come first, but second-tier magic alone is nowhere near enough to stop them. Alan raises his hand and declares that he is invoking the oath of restraint. The world around him shifts completely. A grand voice echoes through the space and shakes reality itself. It tells him to state his first restriction. The voice is so powerful it almost makes the world feel real again. Alan declares his first restriction. He says he will always perform the hand signs of Babylonia when using magic. The voice asks what he wishes to gain from this. Alan requests the power to twist the laws of the world a little further than before. The voice answers him with a single word. Granted. Alan takes a breath and gets ready for his second restriction. He announces his second restriction out loud. Dark energy ripples through the frozen world as the voice waits for him to speak. Alan declares that when using magic he will strictly chant the words of Babylonia every time. The voice asks what he wishes to gain. Alan requests even greater power to defy the laws of the world. Alan's expression shifts with confusion. He wonders what inheriting the will is supposed to mean. Alan recalls that by choosing both restrictions at the same time, the hand signs and the chanting together, he gets the highest possible magic attack power available in the game. He is trusting the detailed gameplay knowledge that is burned into his memory from all those countless runs of psychedelia. This has to work out. The ring dissolves right into his hand as the oath of restraint takes hold of him. Alan confirms that the restriction is now active. The voice delivers its final message to him. It says that it trusts and entrusts everything to the one who inherits the will. Alan blinks in surprise and wonders what inheriting the will actually means in practice. He does not remember anything like this from the game at all. The ring finishes absorbing completely into his body. The restriction is fully applied now. The black and white world begins to return to color all around him. Time starts flowing again. Evan charges toward the golems with his sword drawn and ready to fight with everything he has. Alan raises his hand up. Mana flows from his body and gathers at his fingertips. The sphere of lightning that forms there is small and dim. The ring sits on his thumb now. Alan confirms one more time that the restriction is in place. The voice echoes one final time. It promises to forever watch over the one who inherits the will. Then it fades away into silence. The golems reach striking distance. Evan screams that second-tier magic is not strong enough to stop these things. Our boy stands his ground as the golems close in on him from every single direction. Evan's voice cracks with desperation, and he tells Alan to just run already. Alan stares at the tiny lightning sphere sitting in his palm. It looks pitiful. Even after pouring in all his mana, it barely glows at all. He accepts that no matter how hard he trains, this is always going to be his limit, which is exactly the reason he needs the Oath of Restraint in the first place. Alan decides it is time to test out the restriction and see if the price he paid for it is worth it. Energy crackles around him as he prepares the enhanced spell. Alan forms the Babylonian hand signs and chants the incantations out loud. The tiny sphere explodes into a massive orb of blue lightning that lights up the entire canyon around them. Alan gathers every last drop of mana he has at his fingertips. He figures it is finally time to test the refraction and see what kind of price comes with it. Alan activates the first incantation and calls out refraction. The small orb of lightning at his fingertips distorts and breaks apart into chaotic lines of energy. Alan's gaze locks forward with fierce concentration as the spell erupts out of his hand. A crackling surge of lightning fires outward and tears into the dark ravine ahead. He follows up right away and calls out repulsion. The energy warps and blasts outward with tremendous force behind it. The burst of lightning rips through the ravine and splits the air with a deafening crack that echoes off the walls. Our boy's eyes sharpen as the spell evolves into its final form. He calls out blue light, and cold blue lightning floods across the entire ravine all at once. Alan forms a precise hand sign and declares Line of Diffraction. The lightning branches out into hundreds of crackling lines in every direction. Lightning spirals all around Alan as the combined spell reaches its full power. Alan's jaw tightens as the full force of the spell fires off in one devastating blast. The whole ravine lights up as bright as daylight for a second. Evan's eyes go wide with shock at the sheer power of his own magic coming out like that. The lightning tears through every golem in the ravine and reduces all of them to rubble in a single sweep. Alan stares in disbelief as the last of the golems collapse into piles of broken stone around him. Dust rises up slowly from the wreckage. What remains of the golems crumbles apart and rocks and debris scatter across the ground everywhere. The dust and debris settle over the now silent ravine. Evan's jaw drops and he stands there frozen in the middle of all the rubble. He blurts out and asks what the hell just happened. Evan presses Alan and asks if he has been hiding his strength this whole time. Alan replies calmly that he is not hiding anything at all. Alan explains that in 15 years of being a possessor, he has never once used this kind of power before. Evan pushes further and asks if that is really just incantation magic he is looking at. Alan's expression stays perfectly flat and gives nothing away. He responds with a simple yes and leaves it at that. Deep down, Alan does not know either. The result catches even him completely off guard, and he is still processing it. Alan recalls that back in the game Psychedelia, the same spell never hits anywhere close to this hard. The attack boost is only supposed to be 70% at level 21. Alan's brow furrows slightly as he works through the logic in his head. He explains that this time he enhanced the chain lightning magic with 4 incantations and hand signs for a total of 5 forms combined. Alan goes on to say that in other words he set up a magic configuration for a large-scale lightning spell. He adds that his original plan was only to test it out because of his own mediocre abilities. Alan admits he never even considered the possibility that the spell itself could be amplified by his racial trait on top of everything else. The guy shakes his head in quiet disbelief. He figures the spell must have been enhanced again and again, stacking on itself. Even so, the idea that chain lightning becomes total overkill like this is hard for him to accept. Alan concludes that the result he expected was only about half of what actually came out in the end. Alan lets out a tired groan and mutters that the whole thing is far more exhausting than he expected it to be. Evan grimaces with unease and asks who in the world created such an unpleasant place as this. Alan hesitates with a quiet hum before responding. Alan tries to recall the name of the inventor, but he cannot quite place it. He only has bits and pieces from the game community boards to go off of. Alan mentions that the place eventually becomes known as the Image of Palatio. Evan picks up on the name right away and asks if a guy named Palacio is the one who created it. Evan's expression shifts to confusion as the name sinks in. He asks Alan to repeat what he just said because he is clearly thrown off by it. Alan quickly changes the subject and tells Evan they need to head back to the exit now. He adds that there is no reason to stay here any longer than they have to. Evan remarks that the young master is more diligent than he looks on the outside. A rare spark of enthusiasm crosses Alan's face as he starts explaining things. He tells Evan that choosing a hand sign that matches the spell formula increases its power. Alan continues that picking the right incantation can enhance something unexpected and give him the same potential for further development down the line. Alan recalls that in the game the visual effects are invisible and only the numbers change on screen. It just shows a simple 10% attack boost at level 13 and nothing else. A flash of curiosity lights up Alan's face. He notes that this time around he can actually see the spell changing with each modification he applies to it. Alan explains that this means he can design basic modifications and run controlled experiments with each magic configuration going forward. He plans to test it all further once his mana recovers. Our boy lets out a small breath and admits that in any case it is a relief that things turned out fine in the end. A pair of sharp green eyes watches from the shadows with a gleam of quiet intensity behind them. Deep in the dark forest, a lone figure moves in silence among the trees without making a sound. Ancient glyphs glow faintly in the darkness. These are remnants from the era of the forgotten outer gods. Rini's breath catches as recognition hits her all at once. These are the glyphs of the Alahef Empire, and she never expected to find symbols like these in a place like this. Rini murmurs that it makes sense now. Most people have no idea why ancient magic techniques like these still remain in the world at all. Rini lets out a dry laugh to herself. She is clearly amused and impressed in equal measure by what she found. Rini stands still in the shadows and her expression shifts from quiet amusement to something far deeper than that. She cannot look away from what she is witnessing. Long ago, one man survived the devastating attacks of the outer gods during the event known as the Black Moon. He mastered double summons and became the strongest magician alive, and half the rulers in the empire answered to him. This is the brilliant Emperor Palatine the Great. He is the one who created all of this knowledge. Before long, the world will know the great inventor's name once more. Rini's eyes sharpen as all the pieces fall into place for her. She recalls that Evan mentioned a guy named Palacio creating this place, and the connection becomes undeniable now. Rini whispers that once everything becomes clear, it all makes sense. She trails off and marvels at someone who will one day leave a mark on history itself. Rini admits she did not expect the Great Moon to have any connection to Palatine at all. Rini's eyes widen with genuine shock. She notes that the magic Alan mastered does not even exist anywhere in the ancient library. Rini wonders out loud just what he truly is. Rini concludes that the Red Moon is right about him all along. In a dark corner of the forest, a cloaked figure arrives to meet Rini. She acknowledges their presence with a glance. Rini asks if they managed to get the information they needed. The operative's face stays cold and unreadable. They respond with a flat no. The operative reports that the Dark One is dead. The operative adds that his head twisted all of a sudden in mid-air. Rini responds that they will need to report this for processing. Gnarled branches twist against the cold night sky and cast jagged shadows across the ground below. In the distant territory of Zenonia County, Khalida thinks to herself that the rumors are not just rumors after all. She recalls his presence as chillingly emotionless. A chill runs through Khalida as she replays the encounter over in her mind. She thinks that his eyes are those of the abyss itself. Khalida repeats the word famous under her breath, and a curious smile starts forming on her lips. Khalida acknowledges that yes, Count Zenonia is strong and famous throughout the kingdom. However, she pauses with a knowing look on her face. Khalida's red eyes narrow with a predatory gleam in them. She points out that Alan called her famous even though she does not participate in any social activities at all. Khalida turns to her father with a sly smile and asks if he does not find that fascinating. Count Zenonia sits motionless in his chair and replies that she is the count here. Khalida raises her hand and snaps her fingers once. The sound echoes through the silent room. The light vanishes from Count Zenonia's eyes in an instant. His sharp gaze turns vacant, and drool begins to trickle down from his slack mouth. Kalita looks at her puppet father without a shred of guilt on her face and remarks that no one will ever know the truth about any of this. Kalita wonders out loud how Alan figured it out. She pauses and notes that he said there are too many eyes watching them at the time. Frustration flashes across Kalita's face as the truth sinks in. She mutters that Alan also noticed the little act she and her father were performing together at the banquet. A frantic servant bursts into the room and cries out for Madsi Kalita in a trembling voice. Kalita asks what the matter is. The servant stammers that they need to head out soon. Kalita's expression darkens the moment she steps into her room. Something deeply unsettling is waiting for her inside. Kalita pieces together the situation and determines that the informant did not reveal any secrets. Whoever did this brought the body into her room on purpose as a message for her. Kalita lets out a sharp, breathless laugh. She demands to know how they figured it out. Kalita's eyes blaze with a dangerous mix of fury and fascination. She realizes that Alan caught a critical flaw through the very banquet she organized herself. Meanwhile, our boy sits on the cold ground somewhere far away with a question mark practically hovering over his head. He looks completely clueless about the storm he kicked up. Alan closes his eyes and catches his breath. He is too drained to think about anything else right now. In the Altia Ducal estate, Loria stands in the dark and thinks to herself that just as she expected, Alan is not someone to underestimate. Loria reflects on his unwavering determination. She notes that he has cold eyes just like her father does. Loria's expression tightens with unease as the memory sticks with her. She tells herself that Alan is the kind of person she must never make an enemy of, no matter what. Loria admits that Alan is her last lifeline at this point. She adds bitterly that he refused to accept any deal that would result in losses for himself. Loria's face darkens with frustration. She recalls how all of her assets and power were taken away by her 6 siblings. The eldest son Timalian and the daughters and the second son Kig have stripped her of everything she had. Loria stands alone in the shadows and whispers that she has nothing left. The Grand Altia estate looms in the distance behind her. Loria reminds herself that she survived this long only because of her father's love and mercy, but she has no idea what to do next. A sudden burst of footsteps echoes through the hall. A panicked servant rushes in and calls out to Lady Loria. The servant announces that the youngest lady has returned. Then, with trembling words, they report that Lady Pyong and Kig have done something terrible. The servant finishes the sentence. They tell Loria that Pyong and Kig have taken their own lives. Loria freezes on the spot and whispers in disbelief, asking what they just said. Loria's eyes go wide with shock and confusion. She argues that those people are the type who would stab their own family before ever taking their own lives. She says it does not make any sense at all. Loria demands to know what happened to Tamalian and Marianne. Her voice breaks with urgency as she asks. A servant cries out that Lord Tamalian is dead. His body lies crumpled on the floor in front of them. Horror fills the air as another voice screams out for Lady Marianne. A dark figure looms above her fallen body. Loria stands in the doorway, and her mind is reeling from all of it. She whispers to herself, asking what in the world is happening right now. A shadowy figure stands in the middle of the carnage, cloaked in darkness. With a cold and measured voice, the figure announces that all targets are successfully eliminated. Loria stands alone in the silent hallway. She can only manage a single whispered word. Alan's words ring through her mind like a bell. Good things will happen. Loria's thoughts race as she recalls Alan's true nature. He is the mastermind of the Palacio household and the one who hides his claws and waits for the perfect moment to seize power. A quiet tremor runs through Loria's body as realization hits her. She murmurs to herself that this is what he meant all along. Loria steadies her breathing and draws the parallel in her head. Just like him, she thinks. Loria states plainly that she became the only successor in the entire ducal family overnight, just like that. Loria's lips twitch with a hollow laugh. She lets out a single bitter sound. Loria asks herself what kind of monstrous devil she made a pact with. Then she admits that she cannot go back now, even if she wanted to. A dark chill settles over Loria as she thinks about what comes next. She wonders what happens to the people who betray him and reminds herself that there are already far too many examples out there. Loria clenches her fist and resolves that she has to walk the path she chose. There is no turning back from this. 2 months pass since the upheaval in the Altia family. A messenger arrives at Alan's study and announces that he comes under the orders of Duke Altia. Alan's eyebrows rise in surprise. He repeats the name Duke Altia out loud because he clearly did not expect this visit at all. Evan examines the gift and identifies it as a bottle of Serenese wine. He notes that it costs several thousand gold per bottle and admits he never expected to see one in person like this. Evan observes that Duke Altia herself prepared the gift and not anyone else. Our boy tilts his head in confusion and asks why she is sending him something this extravagant. Alan asks the messenger if the gift is truly meant for him. The messenger confirms that the Duke personally prepared the package and ordered him to deliver it here. Alan murmurs to himself in puzzlement and repeats the words the Duke herself under his breath. Alan stares at the wine bottle and the card, but he still cannot make any sense of the situation at all. Alan's eyes narrow as the pieces slowly come together in his head. He mutters that if Loria, the youngest daughter, is now the Duke of Altia, then that means every other heir is gone. Loria sits alone in the grand office of the Altia estate and lets out a soft sigh. She notes that 2 months passed by so quickly. Loria reflects that after the former Duke died and peace returned to the family, she became the Duke through the accession ceremony. She marvels that she could not even enter this office before all of this happened. Loria's gaze grows distant as she recalls what happened. She thinks to herself that the death of her siblings came so suddenly out of nowhere. Loria adds that despite all the chaos, she was not suspected at all by anyone. Loria explains her alibi. When her siblings died, she was busy attending the ball far from home. At the same time, her own secret organization was being destroyed by her siblings back at the estate. Loria states flatly that when she returned to the mansion, she was quite literally powerless with nothing left. Loria's voice drops with a mix of fear and admiration. She admits she realized it late and was surprised by it. She cannot believe that Alan even used her powerlessness to his advantage like that. Loria notes that Alan declined her request quite coolly on the surface, but in secret he perfectly handled all the cleanup without anyone noticing a single thing. Loria's expression fills with awe and dread at the same time. She asks herself just how far ahead Alan calculates everything. She recalls that she never even told him her siblings' names because she did not want to bother him with the details. The weight of it all presses down on Loria as she stands alone in Alan's shadow. Loria concludes that Alan helped her because he views her as part of some larger plan he has going. Loria's brow creases as she analyzes the situation further. Although she managed to absorb the remaining organizations of Altia, she knows it is not enough to match the strength he will eventually demand from her. That means he wants something specific from her. Loria considers the Palacio family for a moment. They are merely a countryside viscount whose name carries infamy and nothing else. She reasons that if there is something she has that Alan does not, it would be the prestigious Altia name. Loria pieces the whole thing together. She concludes that what Alan truly needs is the power and reputation that comes with the Altia name behind him. Loria's expression steadies with resolve. She tells herself that for now she needs to focus on what she has to do. Loria adds that the Distinguished One will contact her soon enough. She hopes he enjoys the gift of gratitude she sent him. Loria adds that the Distinguished One will contact her soon enough. She hopes he enjoys the gift of gratitude she sent him. The Altia envoy bows and announces that he will take his leave now. Loria watches him go with a faint smile on her face. Back at the Palacio estate, Evan squints at the wine bottle. He mentions that he heard Serenese wine is something people treasure for a lifetime. The gift feels far too generous for no reason. Evan looks at Alan with a troubled expression on his face. He mutters that something about all of this does not feel right. Alan stares at the card of respect and the bottle, and he is still wearing a look of pure confusion. A few months pass after that. The night before the succession ceremony, a staff member with short, dark hair greets Alan and calls out to the young master. The staff member quickly corrects himself and asks if they should address him as the Count now. Alan waves it off and explains that the succession ceremony does not happen until tomorrow. He sighs and admits he does not plan on officially becoming the Count anyway. Alan explains that he can manage the household without holding any formal title. He just prefers to keep things simple. Evan steps in and hands Alan an envelope. He tells him that the letter from Utia arrived. Alan accepts the letter with a quiet nod. Alan breaks the seal and begins to unfold the letter from Utia. Alan's expression turns serious for a moment. He asks Evan if there is any new information about the assassins who took down Leo. Evan shakes his head and responds that nothing came to light yet. He adds that the Information Guild is conducting a thorough investigation, so they should give it more time. Evan changes the subject and asks the guy what his goal is now. He adds that he assumes it is not revenge Alan is after. Alan pauses to think about it. He explains that all the things that differ slightly from the original game are probably butterfly effects he caused along the way. So from now on, he is just going to prepare for anything unexpected that might come up. Alan opens Utia's letter and wonders what she wrote this time around. A warm glow fills the page as he begins to read through it. The letter has small drawings by Utia showing the children at the orphanage. Babies full of energy and children smiling among flowers and meals shared together around a table. Alan's lips curve into a small smile as he studies each little illustration one by one. The drawings are simple, but they feel full of life. Alan reflects that this routine of exchanging letters every month became something familiar to him over time, and each time that warm feeling in his chest grows a little deeper. Alan admits that he never raised children before in his life, but seeing all the drawings and updates from Utia fills him with a feeling he cannot quite put a name to. That gentle smile keeps spreading across his face without him even noticing. A thought crosses Alan's mind just then. He realizes that the 5 children Utia watches over are the very same people who become the 5 deadly sins later on. He remarks that the timing feels about right. Alan tells Evan that the children are now ready to go out into the world and into society on their own. Evan confirms that the ones Alan ordered him to save are about that age now. An illustration shows the 5 children standing together side by side. Alan's eyes soften as he looks at a small card from the children that reads, "Thank you for raising us." He takes a breath and tells himself that the time has finally come. Alan announces that it is time to let them go. Evan looks at him with mild surprise and asks if he is sure about that. Evan points out that Alan gathered them all in one place precisely because they had nowhere else to go. Alan explains that there is no reason to keep them together anymore. Once they grow up, they can choose their own futures for themselves. Our boy leans back with a thoughtful expression on his face. He reasons that he only took care of them because they are the future deadly sins, so they should be more than capable on their own by now. Evan nods and agrees that they all seem to be in fine health. Alan recalls each of their talents from the game. Utia has the talent of faith. Deus has the talent of the sword. Rene has the talent of knowledge. Serum has the talent of a fighter. Radon has the talent of an apostle. Alan's gaze sharpens with confidence as he concludes that if they use their talents in the right fields, they will be more than fine out there. Alan decides that while he is at it, he should send a personal gift along with each letter too. Alan begins drafting the individual letters, one for each of the 5 kids. Alan stretches his arms and announces with satisfaction that he is all done with them. He takes a big sip of his drink to celebrate finishing. Evan picks up the sealed letters and tells Alan he will be back after delivering them. Alan wonders quietly if there is something more he can give the children before they grow beyond his reach. Alan thinks to himself that the children should read his letters and go out into the world on their own terms. A bird takes flight into the sky above the estate. Deep in the Blue Moon headquarters, Utia announces that the orders from the Great Moon have arrived. She notes that this time he delivered the letters to each of them individually, which is different. The 5 sins exchange confused glances with each other. Individual letters from the Great Moon are something entirely new to all of them. Seorang leaps into the air with joy and lets out an excited cheer. Deus and Rene study their letters with quiet focus. Radon reads his in silence off to the side. Utia watches all of them with her sharp red eyes, and a deep unreadable intensity settles across her face as she observes them. The Blue Moon gathers in the deep shadows of their hidden hall. Someone announces that the orders have arrived, and that this time the Great Moon delivered them to each of the members individually. Deus stares down at his letter in quiet focus. Beside him, Seorang bursts with excitement and twirls with her own page as pink sparkles fly around her, while Rene reads hers in silent thought. Utia's face stays calm and composed as she clasps a fresh letter close to her chest. She tells the others that before anything else they should give the previous letters a read too, because the orders he sends require a high level of understanding. Seorang gasps and asks if they can really read them now. Another voice points out that only Utia could read them before. Utia explains that since he gave each of them a separate order, it means he decided the time has come for everyone to see. A pile of handwritten letters lies spread across the table between them. One of the sins hums in confusion and wonders out loud if this casual writing is truly meant to be in order. Utia's expression softens with a quiet pride as she lifts the letter higher. She confirms that the Great Moon disguised the orders as ordinary conversations from the very beginning and tells them to look at it closely. She points to the first page and explains that this is the very first order, the one that came right after his greeting letter. The faded handwriting reveals him casually mentioning his second brother and asking her to look after the child he just sent. Utia continues that within these gentle lines he names the elimination target and gives them their mission to carry out. Utia's eyes shine with quiet awe as she lifts the second letter higher. She tells them that he also asks them to report the situation afterward and that this is the very moment he entrusts the entire Blue Moon to her. She adds that as they can see he personally chose every single one of them. Deus nods slowly and remarks that it must all be done to prevent information leaks when he recalls his very first order. Utia repeats that this is how it works, so they must clearly understand his orders and carry out every mission. One of the sins wonders out loud whether it would be safer to simply visit the Great Moon in person or use a magic communicator. Another agrees and points out that if leaks are the problem, then why bother with letters at all? Utia's red eyes flare with a chilling glow as she holds up the sealed letter. She tells them she hopes they have not forgotten that all they have to do is follow the order. Someone watching her thinks quietly that her trust in the Great Moon is chillingly steadfast. Radon's gaze stays cool and unwavering in the dim light beside Deus. He answers quietly that he has not forgotten. Searing lights up and cheers that they should hurry up and read the order then. A single lantern glows in the dim hallway as the group gathers around the crates in the warehouse. Deus hums softly while skimming his page. He tells the others that the Great Moon ordered him to head to Caliburn, the nation of knights. Beside him, Siwarang frowns at her own letter and complains that hers sends her to Colony, and then pouts that she does not like desserts at all. A quiet excitement settles over the group as each one shares where they are being sent. Radon announces that for him it is Raxus, the entertainment city. Reen reads out loud that she has been told to head to Lartania, the maze city. Utia then murmurs that hers is the Holy Kingdom Rosario, and asks the others if what they all must do is written clearly inside their letters. Deus glances at his letter once more and tells the others that he does not know the reason, but the Great Moon ordered him to become a knight. Siarang flips through her own page and adds with a cheerful grin that the Great Moon also tells them not to worry because the patronage will continue. Rinna's eyes soften with calm focus as she lowers her letter. She mentions that the Great Moon also told them the location of the gifts he prepared for them. Radon rests slumped against the floor with a pained look and one hand reaching up weakly. From somewhere nearby, another voice says that whatever the gifts may be, they will all find out once they get there. Utia tells the group that this is good but warns them to remember one rule above all else. Unless the Great Moon says it first, they must never mention the name of the Blue Moon to anyone. Her red eyes burn with a quiet warning as she presses both hands to her chest. A quiet resolve fills the air as the meeting comes to a close. A bright sky shines beyond the trees as a lone figure begins to walk forward, ready to set out toward their assigned mission. 3 months later, a desk piled high with thick books sits beneath a warm chandelier. The cover of one open volume gleams in the lamplight as the pages turn quietly on their own. Alan sighs and complains that, as expected, there is nothing here about the change in magic and phrases at all. He decides quietly that he will simply have to experiment with it himself. Alan's body relaxes as he leans back in his chair with a long stretch. He glances over toward Evan and asks how the search for whoever killed Leo is going. Evan answers from his own desk that the Information Guild says they found nothing yet, and our boy quietly repeats the words back to himself. Alan thinks to himself that it seems the butterfly effect has slipped right out of his hands at this point. He blames the trouble on his own choice to save the 5 deadly sins, and notes that the world now drifts further from the original story by the day. Even Loria, who in the original story is meant to die, has instead become Duke Altia. Alan reflects that her power and influence are expanding at a terrifying speed in the underworld. A small frown settles on Alan's face as he reaches a quiet decision. He tells Evan that they should stop investigating the assassin altogether. Evan blinks in mild surprise and asks if he is really sure about that. Alan thinks to himself that this is clearly a situation where ignorance is bliss, He recalls that in the world's original setting, almost nothing can escape the network of the Information Guild. He warns himself that even if he tries to dig into what he should not, then what comes back at him may be worse than anything he can handle. A chill of unease passes through Alan as he murmurs to himself about it. He adds that if a precaution meant to prevent disaster ends up leading him to his own death, then the whole effort becomes meaningless. Alan's eyes harden as he weighs the danger one final time. He tells himself that secret organizations like that will not move against him as long as he does not meddle in their affairs. He concludes they have no reason to attack him unless he approaches them first, so at this rate there is simply no point in continuing. Evan nods at Alan and tells him that he will let the investigators know to stop their work right away. Evan adds that he also has another piece of news to share. He tells Alan that apparently Deus has been appointed as a knight in Caliburn recently. Alan responds with a warm smile and says good for him. 3 months later, a relaxed afternoon mood drifts through the courtyard. The guy and Evan sit on a bench with skewers of grilled food in their hands. Alan murmurs how talented Deus must be, and Evan adds that apparently the boy built an entire knight order on his own. Alan reacts with a shocked exclamation and tells Evan that then Deus must already be at least expert level or higher than that. Alan thinks back to the sword hierarchy he remembers from the game where sword master sits above sword expert and sword expert above sword user. He mutters that it has not even been that long since Deus was first appointed, has it? Evan answers that people have been talking and saying the world will see the 5th Master Knight in less than 10 years. A proud little glow lights up Alan's face as he turns the news over in his head. He asks Evan if by Master Knight he means the ones known as the Swords of Caliburn. Evan nods and confirms that Deus is indeed quite talented. Alan smiles warmly and says he is quite proud of him, while Evan adds that Caliburn must be very noisy because of all this. 6 months later, the Count's grand mansion stands silently against the bright morning sky. A whole year has now passed since the 5 deadly sins moved out of the orphanage. Just as Alan is getting used to the daily work of being a count, Evan walks up to him and says he just heard some very recent news. Alan answers with a casual hum while keeping his pen moving across the page. Alan's pen pauses as Evan steps closer with the papers in hand. A quiet anticipation fills the room before the words even leave Evan's mouth. Evan tells him that apparently Deus has officially become a Sword of Caliburn. That makes him the 5th Master Knight of the entire nation. Alan's eyes go wide and a stunned cry bursts out of him as the news lands. Steam practically rises off his head as he spins to face Evan in shock. He stammers that only sword masters can become the Master Knight, so how is something like this even possible? Alan recalls from the game that the Sword Master of Psychedelia is a superhuman who has gone beyond the Aura Blade and unlocked a unique ability known as derivation. Alan presses Evan and asks if he is really saying that Deus is already a Swordmaster now. Evan answers that to be more precise, Deus is about to become one since he has not yet created his own derivation. Evan adds that the nation gave him the title of Master Knight anyway, because not only has Deus already won a duel against the 4th sword. A thoughtful look settles on Alan's face as he weighs the news. Evan continues that Caliburn has also lost a Master Knight to the Northern Barbarians not long ago. Alan nods slowly and agrees that they have been at war for more than a decade now. Evan reminds himself that simply realizing mana and moving it around takes a full 15 years of training. He adds that derivation itself takes at least a few decades to master. He then thinks of the first sword Reinhardt, the youngest Master Knight ever to exist, who first reached that height at 32. Alan's mind drifts back to his memories of Reinhardt joining his party as a temporary comrade. He pictures the red-haired swordmaster's confident voice declaring that he wielded his sword since the age of 5, and asking him to have some faith in the youngest swordmaster to ever exist. Alan reflects that Reinhardt is unbelievably strong, and yet even with all his raw talent it still took him over 20 years to climb to that height. He cannot help wondering how a child with no real knowledge of swords became a Master Knight in such a short time. A sly smile creeps onto Alan's face as a new idea takes shape in his head. He wonders to himself that if Deus is already just waiting for his derivation, then he may soon surpass even Reinhardt as a swordmaster. Our boy grins quietly and thinks that maybe he can leech off Deus a lot sooner than he ever expected. A small worry flickers across Alan's face as he stares quietly at his desk. He wonders whether perhaps Deus will never thank him, or maybe he simply cannot expect that sort of thing to ever happen. A tiny chibi Alan waves the thought off and tells himself that that boy would never reach out anyway. He adds after all that he only ever gets letters from Utia. A stack of letters lies fanned out on the table between them. Even after Utia left for the Holy Kingdom, her notes keep arriving regularly. Each one carries fresh news about the deadly sins she helped raise, and it seems they all stay in close touch with her. A faint pout settles on Alan's face as he gazes ahead with quiet disappointment. He thinks that even though the sins have never seen his face before, they could at least thank him for the gift. He admits softly to himself that he kind of feels bad about it. Alan slaps both of his own cheeks awake with a sharp clap and tells himself to go back to basics. He reminds himself that he is already more than thankful they have not destroyed the kingdom after awakening into the 5 deadly sins. He concludes warmly that as long as they are all doing well, he is happy with that. The capital of Caliburn glitters across the central area of Kirtham, where a high-ranking noble keeps his residence. Tall spires reach into the violet sky as the city stretches out in every direction. A proud energy fills the grand mansion where the illustrious solar eclipse knights reside. In the courtyard below, knights cry out as they train with their blades, and every swing rings through the air. Quiet footsteps echo through the dim hallway as a tall figure walks home through the soft evening light. Deus stands by the tall stained glass windows in his dark armor and lets out a long breath. A formal mark identifies him as Deus Macallion, the captain of the Solar Eclipse Knights and the youngest Master Knight to ever exist. Siley comes running with one hand raised high and her bright voice calling out for her brother. Soft light flowers seem to bloom around her as she rushes forward in a pale dress. A gentle warmth spreads across Deus's face as he watches her come toward him. His usual cold edge melts away into a quiet, almost shy smile. A heavy silence hangs in the still air between the two of them for one long moment. Deus clears his throat with a quiet ahem and tries to compose himself again. Deus thinks to himself that even after a whole year, looking back still makes him feel embarrassed about it. He remembers the day he lost everything to those black things, when Siley was torn away from him in the darkness and fell into the void as he reached out in vain. A pure, helpless fury rises through young Deus as he stretches up toward the disappearing light. All he had left in that moment, he recalls, was a single uncontrollable rage. Dark tendrils swallow the last image of Siley as she vanishes into the void above him. Deus admits that what remained alongside the rage was a burning hatred that he could not put down. Young Deus sits alone in a stone cell with torn clothes and his arms wrapped around his knees in heavy silence. A bitter resolve fills young Deus as he lifts his eyes toward the figure standing in the light. He admits that the fact the Great Moon saved his life was not by itself a good enough reason to swear his allegiance to him. But because Utia promised him he could one day take revenge with his own hands, he followed every order under the blue moon. Deus moves through swirling pink and purple energy with his sword raised in motion. He admits that working as part of the blue moon put him through many dangerous missions and brutal training. A close look at his weary body shows the toll of every assignment carved into him. He confesses that he never once cared for his own well-being during that time. For a few long years, he carried out the missions that would become the foundation for fighting back against the Black Things. A quiet curiosity stirs in Deus as he finally receives his very first personal order. Seorang stands beside him with her cat ears perked and smiling softly at the contents of the letter. Deus reads the page once and asks out loud what this is, since it feels so completely out of the blue to him. The handwritten note shows the order plainly across the page. A small hotel sits in southern Caliburn where the Great Moon left a gift for him to take a look at. Deus admits the idea of the gift does not really excite him as he walks up to the quiet wooden door beneath a soft chime. A flicker of golden light catches Siley's pale eyes as she lifts her face into the glow. Deus pauses in the doorway and wonders to himself what could possibly be waiting in a place like this. He steps forward in that sudden moment with the words of the letter still fresh in his mind. A small figure in a soft pink robe stands ahead of him, framed by warm light pouring through the room. The gift from the Great Moon waits just out of his reach. A small trembling hand stretches up through the bright air as Deus moves closer. A wave of disbelief and joy rolls over Deus as the small figure rushes straight into his arms. The family he thought he lost forever now pulls him close once more. Siley looks up at him with shocked, glistening purple eyes, and her hand pressed lightly to her cheek, as if she cannot believe what she sees. She is more precious to him than his very own life. Hot tears spill freely down Deus's face as he holds her tightly against him. His mouth opens in a silent breaking cry, and his hand grips her trembling shoulder like he never wants to let go again. Deus holds his little sister close and whispers that the one he believed to be gone forever is alive. He calls her name softly. Siley. Deus takes Siley's hands and asks what happened to her after they were torn apart. His voice trembles as the words leave his mouth. Siley's eyes grow heavy with memory as she begins telling her story. She tells Deus that after those things took her away from him, she ended up in a terrible place. The two of them sit across from each other at a small table inside the inn. Siley starts explaining everything from the very beginning. Siley continues her story, and Deus listens without interrupting a single time. Every word she says lands heavier than the last one. Siley recalls the darkness. She explains that she waited in that dark place for her turn for a very long time, and she had no idea what was going to come next. Siley describes the moment her turn to die finally arrived. The darkness closed in all around her as the executioners approached. Just when everything seemed over, a blinding light tore through the darkness out of nowhere. Siley screamed as the energy ripped through the space around her. Siley's voice softens as she explains that she escaped with the help of that mysterious light. Somehow she survived through all of it. A few years passed after her escape. Siley tells Deus that she almost got sold to a slave merchant at one point, but before the transaction went through, a mercenary stepped in and stopped it. A figure with a ponytail and glasses cut through the darkness with a blade. The slavers scattered in every direction. Siley's expression warms as she names her rescuer. A mercenary named Evan saved her life that day. After the rescue, Siley received precious medicine from someone she only knew as the sponsor. A handwritten note came along with it, promising ongoing support for her. The letter says he will keep sending the medicine and support. Now she's safe under the name of Palatio, and Alan says she don't need to worry about her sibling. Siley tells Deus that she is deeply grateful for everything that person did for her over the years. Deus's face tightens with emotion as the realization begins to sink in. He asks Siley if the sponsor protected her under his own name this entire time. Deus murmurs to himself in disbelief. He wonders how the Great Moon even knows about any of this. He never told a single soul about his family before. Deus adds that even Utia only knows about the Black Lamb attack. She never learned any of the details about his sister at all. So the question remains, how does the Great Moon know all of this? A familiar voice echoes through Deus's memory. Utia once told him plainly that the Great Moon knows everything. Deus freezes as the words ring through his mind. His eyes widen and his breath catches in his chest. All of his questions collapse into place like pieces of a puzzle falling together at once. Every doubt and every uncertainty he carried just vanishes. Deus's jaw tightens as he thinks back on Utia's devotion all those years. He admits he could not understand her level of faith until now, but the Great Moon gave something far greater than just salvation. Deus recalls Alan's words to Loria. Good things will happen. He realizes now that those words were not empty comfort at all. They were a promise spoken by someone who already knew the outcome before it happened. Deus thinks to himself that when Alan spoke those words, he already knew everything about the situation. He was giving a hint to the child who ended up alone in the world. Siley peeks through the doorway and calls out to her brother. She asks if he is all right in there. Deus blinks and steadies himself. Deus reflects that Alan's power could easily act on its own without any restraint at all if he wanted. Instead, the Great Moon chose to be generous and merciful about it. He saved lives quietly and never asked for anything in return from anyone. Deus clenches his fist as gratitude floods through him. The survival of his family is beyond any reward he ever imagined possible. It is the supreme gift. Utia's voice returns in his memory once more. She told him that he would also realize it soon enough. He would understand why she follows that man. Deus picks up the letter from the Great Moon and reads the mission again. Head to Caliburn and become a knight. The words burn into his mind. Deus's expression hardens with resolve after that. He declares that he must repay the Great Moon for everything. There is no other option for him. Deus states his mission clearly. He will become the pinnacle of Caliburn and reach the rank of Master Knight. He will create a personal knight order filled with the finest swordsmen alive. A knight approaches Dias and tells him that it is time to move out. This expedition will serve as the first stepping stone for the solar eclipse. Dias stands before the assembled Eclipse Knights in full armor. He declares that he does not care what happens to him along the way. He will await the day he can offer his gratitude and become an instrument for the Great Moon's cause. Dias raises his sword and speaks the motto out loud, "Prove it under the moon." The Solar Eclipse Knights march out on their expedition against the northern barbarians. Dias raises his sword and speaks the motto out loud, "Prove it under the moon." The Solar Eclipse Knights march out on their expedition against the northern barbarians. The view shifts far away to a quiet estate. Alan sits in peaceful silence, completely unaware of the devotion burning in Dias's heart thousands of miles away. He murmurs that things feel really calm lately. Alan notes that all his reports are finished up. With nothing left on his desk, he turns his attention to his favorite subject instead. Our boy flips through stacks of notes as books fly off the desk in the breeze. He scrambles to catch them before they scatter all over the place. Alan grabs a handful of loose pages and begins sorting through them one by one. He reads his own handwriting and clicks his tongue, wondering why he wrote everything in cursive like that. Alan reviews a note from a while back. After returning from the labyrinth, he focused all his spare time on researching the ancient Babylonian phrases. He nods and confirms that the analysis is going well so far. Alan looks over his completed research summary and announces with satisfaction that all of his reports are done now. The analysis lays out the findings in a clear way. Refraction strengthens the instability within a completed spell and causes its range to spread outward. Repulsion crushes the form of the spell and affects the trajectory of the projectile after it fires off. Blue light reinforces parallel forms of magic and is especially effective when used with electrical spells like lightning. Line of diffraction grants penetration to a spell. In practical terms, it creates a critical hit effect. Alan's expression sharpens as he reviews the most important findings from his research. He discovered several strict rules that govern how the phrases actually work together. Alan notes that the same phrase cannot be used twice in one spell. Phrases that clash with the base spell will cause it to fail entirely, and no more than 5 phrases can be layered onto a single cast. He adds that with his tiny mana hole, he can only use magic once per day at most. That limitation alone makes each experiment painfully slow to get through. Alan sighs and admits that it took him a very long time to figure out even this much. The ancient hand signs and phrases belong to a forgotten civilization, so there is zero reference material anywhere in the entire world. In the end, he did all of the research completely by himself with no help from anyone. He managed to learn something new with each experiment, even if the progress came at a crawl. Alan cracks his knuckles and announces that it is time to see the result of 2 full months of experimenting. The guy channels mana into his hands and forms the familiar hand sign. Lightning crackles faintly at his fingertips as the chain lightning spell takes shape. He eliminates the focal point of the manosphere on purpose to create an imbalance in it. Sparks of lightning flicker to life in the gap that opens up. Alan looks at the weak flickering spell and knows it is nothing impressive on its own at all. He whispers that this weak and worthless magic is about to change now. The first phrase leaves his lips. Alan calls out fixation. The crackling lightning freezes in place as if time itself stopped around it. He follows up with compression right after. The frozen lightning shrinks from a large sphere into a tiny, dense bead of pure energy. Alan takes a breath and speaks the third phrase. Breakdown. The bead shatters and loses its spherical form and leaves behind raw, irregular lines of lightning. He opens his hand and says the final phrase. Fleeting bloom. The lightning erupts into a massive tree of blue thunder that stretches high up into the sky above. The tree of thunder stands frozen in the air and blazes with a brilliance brighter than the midday sun. Blue lightning branches out in every direction from the center. The energy radiates outward in waves and fills the entire training ground with crackling blue light. The ground trembles beneath the force of it. The massive lightning tree holds its shape for a breathtaking moment before it slowly begins to fade away. Its blue glow illuminates everything around it. Alan observes the result and nods with quiet satisfaction. He notes that the order of phrases also changes how the spell shows up. When he tried breakdown before fixation last time, the spell vanished completely on him. He pauses and adds that the order truly matters a lot. Using breakdown first causes the entire thing to collapse, but placing it third gives the spell structure instead. A voice behind him gasps in shock. Someone stammers that what they just witnessed is supposed to be impossible. Our boy turns around with a confused look on his face. He spots two figures standing at the entrance of the training hall, and both of them are staring at him with wide eyes. The older figure beside the red-haired woman whispers in disbelief. He asks if that is origin magic they just saw. Alan blinks and repeats the word back. What? Alan's confusion doubles when he recognizes the woman standing there. He blurts out and asks why Kalia is here at his estate right now. The older man with the ornate cane stammers that using origin magic puts someone at the caliber of a 7th circle mage. His voice cracks with disbelief as he says it. Alan stares at the two visitors and repeats the word origin back at them. He points at himself and asks if they mean him. The question mark hovering over his head says everything about how confused he is. In Count Palacio's mansion reception room, Kalia thinks to herself that she has two clear reasons for coming here today. The first reason is to confirm Count Palacio's intentions. This is the man who holds evidence that could cause major damage to the Zenonia family, and yet he never once used it against them. Kalia's eyes narrow as she recalls the second reason. She wanted to detect the level of the organization that is protecting him and controlling other organizations from the shadows. Kalia brought along a powerful asset for this very purpose. She figures that even if meeting the Count does not reveal everything about his shadowy forces, she can at least get a glimpse of what she is dealing with. But instead of getting the answers she came for, our boy leaves her with something she never expected to find. Kalia's expression shifts with disbelief as she thinks about the mage she brought along. She never expected to see this arrogant mage quiver in fear like that. This is Vienkel, a 5th circle mage who was banished from the magic tower for his inhumane experiments. He can wipe out an entire division of soldiers with ease, and even though he always keeps that arrogant attitude toward her as his longtime sponsor, he is shaking right now. Kalia can sense the fear coming off of him. She has never seen him like this before, and she wonders if what Count Palacio just used was really origin magic. Alan walks over with an annoyed look on his face and asks, "What brings you to the county?" Kalia's composure holds steady as she apologizes for the sudden visit. She tells Alan that she has been wanting to meet him so badly that she could not wait any longer. Alan responds that he will not fault her for it. He addresses her as the daughter of Zenonia. However, he tells her to let him make one thing clear first. Alan states plainly that what he just used is not origin magic. His tone is calm and unbothered as always. Alan explains that if she really wants to categorize his magic abilities, then he is only at the 2nd circle. He adds that the mage beside her must have noticed that his magic has no real effect at all, and that unfortunately it cannot be used in both defense and offense. Urahalia's eyes widen slightly as she catches what he really means by all of that. What Alan is actually telling them is to stay quiet about what they just saw. Vienkel forces out the words and admits that Alan is correct and that it seems he was wrong about it. Gorhalia is stunned because Vienkel is actually being polite for the first time ever. Alan lets out a breath of relief and says, "Good." Now that the misunderstanding has been cleared up, he tells her to get to the point of her visit. Kalia explains that she figured she could drop by after passing through some business around here. Alan asks if she does not really have a special reason for coming. Kalia pauses for a moment and then quietly admits that no, she does not have one. Alan's expression stays flat as he tells her that unfortunately he has some work to take care of and cannot sit here for too long. Kalia nods and says she understands. Kalia thanks him for taking the time to meet with her. She announces that they will be leaving now. Before she turns to go, Alan adds that if she ever needs anyone to talk to, she would be happy to listen. Alan advises her to go visit Duchess Altia instead. He says he thinks the two of them would get along pretty well. Kalia's eyes go wide for just a second. She did not expect him to redirect her like that at all. Kalia's composure returns quickly after that. She tells Alan that if he says so, then she will pay Duchess Altia a visit. Outside the gate, the servants begin to gossip among themselves. One of them wonders why a Zenonia would come all the way here. Another one calls them a ruined family from the west. A third mutters that he does not even know what Zenonia wants, and that this is going to be troublesome for everyone. The guy watches the carriage pull away and thinks to himself, if a false rumor about him using origin were to spread, then people who want to make a name for themselves will start showing up and picking fights with him. That would be the worst possible scenario. Alan hopes that they understood what he meant back there. He figures there is no reason for a noble like that to bother visiting someone connected to the underworld anyway. Alan's expression stays tired and uninterested. He mutters to himself that they should just not come bother him. Inside the carriage, Kalia finally asks Viankel the question that has been eating at her this whole time. She asks if what Count Palatio used was really origin magic. Viankel shakes his head and says no, it was not. Kalia's brow furrows in confusion. She presses him and asks then what his reaction back there was all about. Viankel begins to explain it. He says that origin magic is the kind of magic that draws its own laws. Upon the canvas of absolute and unchanging principles, it is permitted only to the pinnacle of all mages. However, Viankel says that what the Count used is something different from that. He tells Kalia that as she asked him to, he used his observation eye to take a look at his magic up close. Viankel continues explaining and says that origin magic is a canvas where absolute principles never change. It is the final destination that all great mages eventually reach. But what Count Palio did is not drawing on that canvas at all. Viankel's voice drops lower as he says this part. Viankel's eyes fill with a mix of awe and terror as he describes it. The Count tore the canvas itself apart. He twisted the absolute and unchanging principles behind the magic. He fixed the lightning in place where it should not stay. Viankel goes on with his explanation. The Count twisted the lightning and collapsed the law behind it completely. But even after he did all of that, the magic still materialized anyway. Viankel can barely get the words out as he calls it an impossible miracle. But what came after that is what truly shook him to the core. Viankel's face twists with pure shock and fear. His whole body tenses up as he recalls what he saw behind the lightning. Behind that miracle is something that should not exist in this world. Viankel whispers that it is clearly the power of the great forgotten god. Viankel groans and grabs his head with both hands. He forces himself to stop thinking about it and says that any more of this is too dangerous. In his younger years, he delved deep into ancient knowledge. Viankel explains that back then he was praised for his research on the Forgotten Era, and because of that he knows exactly how dangerous it is to probe any further into this. He looks Kalia dead in the eyes and tells her to let him be very clear about this. Do not oppose Count Palatio under any circumstances. Kalia lets out a quiet laugh at that. She murmurs a soft sound and her smile is bitter. She realizes that what Viankel is really saying is that it is meaningless for someone like her to try and figure out Alan's intentions. She recalls his words about visiting Duchess Altia, and the whole thing hits her all at once. Kalia's eyes begin to water and a single tear rolls down her cheek. She whispers to herself that she has already become his pawn without even knowing it. 5 months pass after that. It has been about 4 years now since the children left the orphanage. Back at the Palacio estate, Alan calls out to Evan. Alan asks if Evan has any new information for him, and says even better if it is about the children. Evan hesitates for a second and tells him that it is not about the children this time. Evan's expression turns serious as he reports that apparently Zenonia County and Altia Duchy formed an alliance together. Alan freezes and says what? The top 2 of the underworld have allied with each other? Evan confirms it. He says that because it is a convention of the underworld, no one from the outside can know about it, but he is certain this is real. Our boy's mind races as he takes this in. He already sent the sins on a different path, but now he has to deal with some kind of alliance between 2 masterminds on top of everything else. He wonders if the Asteria kingdom is about to fall into ruin because of this. Alan thinks back and wonders if Kalia seriously took his words from back then to heart. He remembers telling her that if she needs anyone to talk to, he advised her to visit Duchess Altia. But then he shakes his head about it. He figures it is probably just a temporary alliance and nothing more. For how cold and arrogant Kalia is, she would never truly commit to something like that for real. Still, Alan decides he should at least make some preparations just in case something goes wrong. Alan sits down and begins writing a letter. He addresses it to Kalia and writes that he apologizes if he came off as too blunt and cold during their meeting. He hopes that this does not look like he is just making an excuse. Alan hands the sealed letter to Evan and tells him he will leave it to him. Evan takes it and says he will send it to the daughter of Zenonia County through the Mercenary Guild. He adds that he will keep an eye out for news about the children too. Alan opens another letter and begins to think about the others. He wonders how Radon and Sarang are doing out there. He has not heard from them since Utia last mentioned in her letter that they arrived at their destination safely. He hopes Sairong is not dead on the streets somewhere out there. Alan recalls the gift he mentioned in his letter to Sairong. If she finds it, she should become the pinnacle of all fighters and earn the title of Baba Yaga for herself. The gift is the essence of the Golden Mane tribe. It grants a 20% critical rate boost. According to the item description, if the sin of pride had obtained this, she would not have fallen into corruption and become a sin in the first place. Instead, she would have become a great wolfkin. Alan's expression turns a little sheepish as he admits to himself that he also let Sairong know about the location of hidden treasures he kept as emergency funds. He figures she is talented enough to make money for herself anyway, so she should be fine with it. That place is the nation of fighters, where strength alone can earn you the entire world. In the nation of Desert Colony, a vast desert stretches out under a dark sky. Somewhere in the caves and canyons of Colony, a lone figure catches her breath after a long fight. A blonde warrior lets out a heavy sigh, and then her voice breaks into pure joy. She shouts that the trial is finally over at last. Sairong drops to her knees in gratitude and cries out to the great moon, thanking him over and over for the gift. She says she thought the essence of the Golden Mane tribe was nothing more than a legend, and yet here it is right in front of her. She begins to remember the stories from when she was a kid. The elders always talked about the essence like it was something sacred and untouchable to them. Sairong's eyes fill with wonder and disbelief. It turns out what they used to tell her back then was not just a fairy tale after all. It was real this whole time. She holds up the essence of the Golden Mane tribe and stares at it in her hands. The memories come flooding back all at once. The Golden Mane tribe, the great beastkin clan of the ancient world. She speaks the name with reverence in her voice. Sairong explains that the essence of the Golden Mane tribe has been awaited by her people for hundreds of years. It grants them strength and authority over everything. The fact that she obtained the essence fills her entire body with purpose. Golden energy begins to surround her. Sairong's resolve hardens after that. She says that the fact that she obtained the essence and passed all of the inner world's trials means something important. It remains true no matter what anyone says. Sairong stands tall with golden light blazing all around her. She declares that the great moon is her benefactor. He is the one who saved her from dying in the bio-experiment years ago. He gave her the power to exact her revenge on the black dragon who killed her parents. Sairong's eyes fill with fierce determination and gratitude as she says this. She trails off for a moment after that. There is something she needs to say out loud. She whispers quietly that she has to repay him for this favor no matter what. Golden energy erupts around Sairong as she powers up. She is sure the Great Moon does not want her to become some mediocre gladiator fighting in the arena. The power surges even higher than before. Her body glows with the ancient strength of her bloodline. Sairong steels herself and declares that from here on out she has 3 goals she needs to accomplish. She needs to become the strongest gladiator in all of Colony. She will revive the Golden Mane tribe by gathering their scattered members from across the land. And finally, there is one more thing she has to do. Sairong unleashes a massive burst of energy that lights up the entire desert around her. She will kill the black dragon with this power. The desert falls completely silent after the blast, and a blue orb floats in the distant sky above. Sairong looks up at the sky and says it quietly to herself. Everything is for him. With fire in her eyes and golden energy wrapping around her whole body, Sairong grins and says it out loud. Let us begin. Under the light of the blue moon in the vast desert of Colony, the great kings of the beastkins, known as the Golden Mane tribe, shall be revived after 500 years of being gone. Evan mentions that something just came to mind. The Information Guild obtained some information about the children. Evan perks up and says that is great news to hear. Alan asks what the information says about them. Evan reports that Sairong has been performing very well in the colony and earned herself the alias Golden Flash. Alan's eyes light up with quiet relief as he repeats the name Golden Flash back. He says that in any case he is glad to hear she is doing fine out there. He adds that you can be anything in that land if you have strength on your side. Then he asks about Radon. Evan tells him that he did not hear much after confirming Radon is doing well in Raxus. There is some information on him, but they are still in the process of verifying whether it is accurate or not. Alan nods and says he sees. Then he turns to Evan and calls his name. Evan looks puzzled and asks if Alan is not supposed to be busy right now. Alan responds with a confused pardon. Evan questions why Alan is giving him all this information all of a sudden like this. Alan tells him that he has to prepare because it takes about a month to get to the magic tower from here. Evan's expression shifts to surprise. He says the magic tower and that he has never even heard about that plan before. Alan blinks and wonders if he never mentioned it to him. Evan sighs and says he is used to it by now anyway. He then asks if it is really a whole month since it only takes about a week to get to the green magic tower. Alan clarifies that they will be heading to the blue magic tower instead. Evan notes that the blue tower is near Labyrinth City and that it is quite far from where they are. He says he will start preparing right away. Our boy leans back and thinks to himself about the trip. He groans about having to spend 3 whole weeks stuck in a carriage, and says there goes his peaceful life as a nobleman. But there is no other choice about it. The item at the blue tower can support his small mana hole, and it will be a tremendous help for him. Alan's mind drifts to Labyrinth City for a moment. He mutters that it brings back some memories. Back in the game he spent a lot of time grinding there. He recalls that the labyrinth in the center of the city is the signature adventure spot in Psychedelia. The player can obtain unique items by raising their level and heading deeper down into it. However, although countless players visit the labyrinth, not a single one ever reached its end. Alan smirks to himself and admits he once used a cheat to get to the 150th floor. He mutters that the devs are insane because there are even more floors beyond that point. He shifts his thoughts to Rin after that. Just like in the game, relics and artifacts are constantly being found in the labyrinth, and because of this, the city has many relic appraisers working there. He figures that Rin is probably taking the appraiser exam soon, and with her talent she should be able to handle it with ease. Alan's expression turns a bit guilty after thinking about it. He figures that he might have given Rin too little of a gift compared to what the others got. All it does is appraise equipment items. He tells himself he should send her some separate support since the gift alone is not enough for her. Among Lartania's countless shops tucked away in the corner of the southern area, there is a secret appraisal shop called Merd, in the labyrinth city of Lartania, ruled by no one. It is the city of explorers and mercenaries. Among Lartania's countless shops tucked away in the corner of the southern area, there is a secret appraisal shop called Merde. The shop quietly gained fame through its unique services over time. It caters mostly to nobles and A-rank explorers who need high-quality work. A masked woman announces that the appraisal is over now. The customer reacts with delight at the result. Among the shop's visitors is the Lord of Lartania himself. Rina's expression stays calm behind her mask as she explains that the device ignites flames using mana. The Lord thanks her and says he will take a closer look at it. The Lord's eyes widen with excitement. He exclaims that it is a relic that can be imprinted. He asks what the imprinted ability does exactly. Rina explains that with just a bit of mana, the flame will keep going for at least an hour straight. The Lord declares that the efficiency just improved drastically and that it is very good work. He thanks Rini as always for her services. She gives a simple reply that he is welcome. The murder shop sign hangs quietly outside the building. Rini removes her mask after the Lord leaves. She notices something about another item and lets out a soft sound of surprise. She realizes that this one can also be imprinted. Rini's eyes fix on the relic in her hands with quiet focus as she examines it. The reason why this shop located in the corner became so famous is because of the imprint ability that only Rini can provide. And the imprint is a gift from the Great Moon. In the back room, a golden eye surrounded by a blue halo floats in the air. This is the source of Rini's power. Rini thinks back to when the Great Moon first told her to become an appraiser. She could not understand the reason behind it at the time. She knows his true destiny is tied to the era of the forgotten outer gods. She understands that everything so far is meant to exterminate the black things. But still something about the assignment did not add up for her. Rin's brow creases as she recalls the Great Moon's instructions: become a magic appraiser in Labyrinth City, Lartania. She just could not figure out what this work had to do with the goal. What does becoming a magic appraiser have to do with killing the black things? But the moment she saw his gift, she realized everything at once. Rin opens the case and stares at what the Great Moon gave her inside. Inside is a relic called the Eye of the Stalker, but Rin immediately senses something off about it. She mutters that it is somewhat different from what she knows. Its substance does not even exist anywhere in the library. Energy surges around the eye as ancient seals begin to crack and shatter one by one around it. After the seals are broken, the imprint ability is unlocked for her to use. Rin realizes what the Great Moon's true plan is for her. To obtain enough power to fight against the black things, she must bring offerings through this relic over time. The eye transforms before her eyes as it absorbs the essence of each sacrifice she feeds into it. Rin's eyes fill with resolve as she understands the full picture now. This relic is both an ability and a means of offering sacrifices. The counter reads 248 out of 500. She tells herself she has 252 more sacrifices to make before it fully awakens. In return for raising the relic's stats, it absorbs something from each item fed into it. The process is essentially changing the eye with every single offering. Rin notes an important detail about the process. The eye only reacts to specific high-tier relics. If the wrong item is sacrificed, the entire stack will disappear completely. This means only someone who can perfectly identify every relic without fail can use it properly. Rin stands tall with conviction, accurately appraising all relics and selecting the right sacrifices to mark with imprint is something only she can do. She was born with the Library of Eternity inside her. Everything is for the sake of killing the Black Wolf. All is according to the will of the Great Moon. A faint glow of devotion burns in Rin's green eyes as she says this. 3 weeks later, the Blue Magic Tower. The Tower Master is currently absent from the premises. A sharp voice cuts through the air and orders them to just state their business and leave already. This is Fenia Krishina, the first commander of the Blue Tower's mages and a 6th Circle mage. Fenia does not even look up from her paperwork as she talks. She tells them she is busy and to get it over with quickly. Alan recognizes her immediately. She is a familiar face from the main storyline of the game. In Psychedelia, she is a once-in-a-lifetime mage who reached the 7th Circle at the early age of 20 and became the tower's youngest master ever. The guy knows the Magic Tower is not just powerful in combat alone. They also produce essential goods for several nations, which makes their authority close to that of nobles. Even the reputation of the Palacio family holds no weight here at all. Alan clears his throat and acknowledges that this is going to be difficult for him. He introduces himself as Count Palacio. Alan states that as he relayed earlier, he came to speak about the time gate. Fania glances at him and asks flatly what about it. Alan says it plainly to her. He can eliminate the time gate. Fenia's expression shifts for just a moment with curiosity at that claim. The time gate is a crack that connects to a mysterious subspace, and it appears in locations where magic is frequently used. It creates anomalies that cause significant damage to the surrounding area. But her interest fades quickly after that. She mutters that with such a lowly talent, what is he even going to do about it? She tells him to just leave. Alan panics slightly and says to wait because this is not how it is supposed to go at all. He insists that he needs an answer from her. Fania lets out a mocking laugh at him. She says, oh, so he is going to eliminate the time gate and claim the treasure inside, and sarcastically says, yes, of course he will. Fania's eyes flash with irritation and she shouts, yeah, right at him. Her magical energy explodes outward across the room. She demands to know if he has any idea how many people come here saying the exact same thing in a single day. Alan tells her he is speaking the truth and asks her to guide him to the time gate so he can show her. He wonders to himself why she will not just trust him on this. Fania cuts him off mid-sentence. She says, hey. Fania's voice drops low and cold. She tells Alan that she knows he needs something huge to flip public opinion because people are starting to find out that the only reason he became count is by luck when his siblings died around him. Magical energy tears through the room and the entire office trembles from it. Fania warns him that none of that means he can come here and cause a ruckus in her tower. Alan realizes that a rumor like that is going around about him and figures it must be because he lives such a quiet life. He notes with some surprise that despite looking like a workaholic, she is surprisingly well informed about the outside world. Alan's expression turns serious as he processes what just happened. She is not just intimidating him on purpose, that is raw magical power leaking out of her. Alan can barely keep his composure standing in front of her. He thinks to himself that she is terrifying. Alan's jaw tightens as he realizes that is only her mana leaking out and nothing more. He figures they would get folded in half if they actually tried to mess with her for real. But he is pretty desperate right now. Our boy steels himself and makes his move. He declares that if he cannot eliminate the time gate, he will surrender his entire property to the magic tower. Fania scoffs and says he is still blabbering nonsense at her. Alan looks her dead in the eyes and says that if she wishes, he will make an oath on it right now. He adds that it is not a terrible offer for just a little bit of her time. Fania falls silent and just stares at him after hearing that. Fania leads Alan underground and stops in front of a heavy door. She tells him the time gate is in here behind this door. She reminds him that as promised, all of his wealth is hers the moment he fails. Alan answers without any hesitation that it will not happen. Fania watches him enter and thinks to herself about it. This is the perfect chance to see if he is the scheme master of the county or merely someone who got lucky with his inheritance. After observing him for just a short while, the answer becomes clear to her. Fania's eyes narrow with disappointment. Unlike the intimidating atmosphere around him, he only has a small mana hole and slightly above average energy sensing ability. His talent sits at the very edge of the second circle and nothing more. She wonders what he is even going to do with that and calls it pathetic. Fania reflects that the truth is there is really no need to close the gate at all. In 3 months it naturally disappears on its own after spitting out a relic. No single mage has ever succeeded in closing a time gate before. However, the time gate in the Blue Magic Tower has been causing a ruckus for over 2 years now, and everyone is tired of it. They stand before the rift together. Fania tells him if he cannot do anything, he can simply exit the room. She notices Alan raising his bare hand toward the gate and asks if he is going to use his hand instead of a staff. Fania remarks that even the ancient magic towers classify that as a primitive method of casting. She says it is a method considered almost like a fairy tale at this point. Fania's patience snaps, and she tells him to stop imitating things he read about and just leave already. But then something shifts in the air all around them. The entire underground chamber begins to tremble and crack around them. Energy ripples outward from where Alan stands. Massive fractures spread across the ceiling and walls in every direction. The space itself feels like it is breaking apart. Fania's eyes go wide with terror. She tries to move, but her body will not respond to her at all. She whispers that she cannot move. Then she realizes it is not just her. Everything around them has stopped moving completely. Something emerges from the darkness right in front of Alan. Fania catches a glimpse of it and barely manages to get the words out. That is, a massive eye with 2 red rings stares back at her from the void. Fania stands there frozen as the entity from beyond the rift reveals itself before the young count. The underground chamber trembles as cracks spread across every surface around them. Fania stands frozen in place. She whispers that she cannot move at all. Fania realizes it is not just her either. Everything around her has stopped moving completely. Then her eye of observation activates on its own without her doing anything. Fenia's eyes lock onto the darkness right in front of Alan. A massive red eye with 2 rings stares back at her from the void. Fenia stands motionless as the entity looms before her. The air itself feels heavy and suffocating all around them. Fenia's eye of observation begins working automatically on its own. It sees through the essence of the unknown. She mutters that it is simple. That thing is just... But then every instinct in her body screams at her to stop right there. She forces herself not to think about it. She must not comprehend what she is seeing. Doom is already predetermined. Like a chalice filled with poison, the moment of understanding brings only destruction with it. The red entity extends a dark hand and presses 2 fingers to its lips. Absolute silence. This is a command that cannot be refused by anyone. Fenia's eyes fill with raw terror as she stares at the entity in front of her. She whispers that she understands. She understands the demand being made. The red-eyed entity slowly fades away, and the frozen world begins to move again around them. Fenia gasps for air as her body finally responds. Raising villains the right way. Chapter 13. The purple rift that marks the time gate is gone now. The underground room is calm once more. Alan lets out a quiet sigh and announces that the time gate is closed. Our boy keeps his face perfectly blank and explains that it was easy for him. He says he just used a special item and method to do it. Alan tells Fenia he will take the relic from this time gate. He adds that he needs to use it a few more times to get used to random magic. Alan glances over at Fenia and wonders to himself if she fell for that explanation. Fenia can barely get the words out of her mouth. She stammers yes and says she will not tell anyone about this. She promises she will not tell a single soul. She insists she is good at keeping secrets and that everything stays right here between them. She begs Alan to believe her. Alan blinks in genuine confusion at her reaction. He mutters to himself and wonders if his bluff actually worked on her. He thinks about it more and is not really sure. He wonders if she truly fell for his story about a special item or if something else is going on. Alan scratches his head and asks himself why she is acting like this all of a sudden. He turns to Evan and says they should go home now. But Fenia chases after them and begs them to please wait a moment before leaving. Fenia holds something out toward them with both hands. She tells Alan that these are mana potions, 5 vials total. Fenia's eyes are wide and desperate as she asks him to please take them with him. She explains that they are the Vice Tower Master's homemade mana potions and that they are of the highest quality available. Alan stares at the potions in front of him. He asks if she really has them to just give away like that. Alan wonders to himself if she is really this grateful that he closed the time gate for them. Fenia stammers and says about what he demanded earlier. She promises she will definitely keep silent about the whole thing. Then Fenia's expression turns intense all of a sudden. She suggests they make an oath of mana right now. She asks if they should do it immediately. The guy panics slightly and thinks that he does not really need to make an oath over something like this at all. He tries to say wait, but it is too late. Before he can stop her, Fenia gathers her magical energy and begins casting the oath on the spot. Alan can only watch as magical chains of light wrap themselves around her. Alan thinks to himself that he feels like she is misunderstanding something about the situation. But the oath is already done and there is nothing he can do about it now. Fenia nods firmly and says that since she is good at keeping promises, he can trust her completely. Alan pauses for a moment and then quietly says, okay. There is no way he can clear this misunderstanding at this point. And just like that, Alan ends up with a huge package he did not ask for. 5 potions and an oath for a reason he does not even fully remember wanting. Alan examines the relic he took from the time gate. Evan asks if that is the treasure from the gate and notes that it looks pretty crude for something that is said to be so difficult to obtain. Evan asks if it has great performance at least. Alan admits he is not really sure about that. Regardless, Alan says he needs it anyway. He tests the bracelet and confirms it works. The item can absorb and store the gems of magic embedded in it. Alan notes with quiet satisfaction that it works perfectly for his purposes. Though the amount it can store is only 1/3 of his mana hole, Alan suddenly slumps over in his seat. He groans that he cannot believe his body needs more than just a support item to function. But then he corrects himself quickly. He says it is for magical investigation and self-preservation only. It is not for combat at all. This is good enough for what he needs. Evan gives him a puzzled look from the side. Alan shifts his thoughts and wonders what Fenia misunderstood back there. For some reason, she started acting polite all of a sudden, and he has no idea why. Fenia waves goodbye from the tower entrance and shouts for them to have a safe trip home. She calls out that she will make herself clear and says she knows he is just a second circle mage. Alan shoots back that he knows that already and adds that she looks like one too. Alan's expression darkens after that, and he mutters to himself, asking if she is making fun of him. Alan watches the blue tower shrink in the distance as their carriage pulls away from it. He thinks to himself that Fenia's reaction is similar to Kalia's from last time. Fenia's face flashes in his memory right alongside Kalia's. Alan finds the whole situation quite uncomfortable to think about, but then he shrugs it off. He will never need to see either of them again, so he guesses it does not really matter in the end. The carriage rolls through a green countryside under warm sunlight. Alan remarks that the weather is nice today. Evan agrees and says it is quite peaceful out here, in the Altia ducal house. Loria greets her guest and says it has been a while since they last met. She tells Kalia she hopes her stay here will be comfortable. Kalia's expression stays composed as Loria addresses her as Lady Zenonia. Loria adds that of course she looks as fine as ever. Kalia says that more than anything she is delighted to see Loria again. She mentions that she feels completely different arriving here compared to before, since there is no more animosity coming from the head of the household. Kalia adds that once again Count Palacio's strategies continue to astonish her every time. Kalia explains that she wanted to convey something in person this time. She says that once she followed his suggestion, she came here right away to discuss what he meant by it. As they talk, they both realize something important at the same time. They are both under the influence of Palatio already. Their alliance formed under Count Palatio's orders with no questions asked from either side. A power struggle between them is meaningless because there is an absolute number one above them both. Because of this, Zenonia and Altia became friendly with one another. Loria asks why Kalia is visiting today since their meeting is scheduled for next Monday. Kalia reveals that the Count sent her a letter and used the day she visited as a pretext for it. Loria asks what the letter says. Kalia pulls it out and they begin reading through it together. Some nobles have complained to him about things. It is about the noble houses. Kalia notes that the letter may look like an ordinary letter on the surface, but she is certain it is some sort of order. She suggests they analyze it from the beginning together carefully. Kalia points out that Alan wrote he does not really have too many noble friends. This means he has no strong aristocratic or royalist allies backing him up. The nobles he connected with are all below the Palatio family in rank. They are merely nobles of convenience without any real power behind them. So in conclusion from all of this, he does not favor either the aristocratic or the royalist factions at all. Kalia's eyes flash with intensity as she asks the obvious question. Is he telling them to kill them all? Both women pause and shake their heads after thinking about it. That is too extreme of a conclusion. Kalia says she believes they need to take a subtler stance on this. Loria agrees with her. Then Kalia arrives at the real answer. Alan wants to push out the existing nobles and establish a new regime in their place. That must be his goal. Loria nods in agreement. This is why he turned them into the strongest noble houses of Asteria. If the wisdom of the West aligns with her power, then victory is possible for them. Kalia confirms that she believes that is the case here. Loria invites her to discuss the plan in detail together. Meanwhile, at the Blue Magic Tower, something else is happening. A voice asks in disbelief if Count Palatio really closed the time gate. Fania confirms it to the Tower Master directly. The Tower Master demands she explain in greater detail what happened. And so the puzzle pieces all appear and move on their own and fit themselves together. Everything falls into place without anyone fully understanding how it all connects. Someone asks Alan if he is okay, but that makes him surprised. Our boy coughs and admits he almost choked on the sweet potato. He says it is good though, and someone hands him some water. He mutters that he just wants to go home already. Alan thinks to himself that it is about time Utia received his letter by now. Night falls over the land. The moon hangs full and bright in the sky above. In a garden filled with white flowers, a figure stands beneath the moonlight. This is the holy kingdom of Rosario. Utia stands among the flowers in silence. Her pink hair glows softly in the moonlight. A close-up of Utia's face. Her red eyes shimmer with quiet emotion as she reads. The night stretches on as Utia reads the letter from the great moon in silence. The flowers around her sway gently in the breeze. A cheerful voice echoes through the blue tower. The Tower Master announces he is back and calls out for his disciple Penia, but then he pauses mid-step. He does not feel the time gate anymore. This is the Tower Master of the Blue Magic Tower and the second oldest mage in the entire world. He tilts his head and asks if something happened while he was gone. The Tower Master's expression shifts to concern when he walks in. He notices Fenia sitting at her desk surrounded by stacks of paper everywhere. Something feels off about her. She barely mumbles a reply about some small circumstances. The Tower Master leans closer and calls her name. He asks if something difficult happened and if she is not in a good mood today. He thinks to himself about how Fenia became the Vice Grand Master at such a young age thanks to her blessed talent for magic. Because of that early success, her arrogance and tyranny have gone through the roof over the years. The Tower Master always let it slide because when it comes to magic she is a genuine beyond genius level talent. He never intended to fix her personality in the first place. The moment she reaches the 7th circle she will use origin so easily that her arrogance will correct itself on its own. So this whole situation right now is quite strange to him. The Tower Master's eyes narrow as he puts it together. He went on a trip and came back to find the time gate gone and Fenia acting like a completely different person. He notes she even cleaned the office, which she never does. Fenia's composure cracks under the questioning. She explains that a count closed the time gate, but she cannot say exactly what method he used to do it, and she made an oath of mana on top of that. The Tower Master's expression turns serious after hearing all of that. There is really not much she can say about it in either direction. That is all she can tell him. The Tower Master strokes his chin and thinks about it. Of course he is an Origin user himself, so he knows how extraordinary the situation must have been for Fania to submit like that. He calls Count Palacio interesting and says it again. Very interesting indeed. Fania reacts with frustration at what he is implying. She insists it is for the sort of fool who tricked the whole Asteria kingdom into fearing him. The Tower Master just smiles and says Count Palacio once more under his breath. His curiosity is clearly piqued by the whole thing. 1 month after returning from the Blue Magic Tower, Alan sits in a training room with the bracelet on his wrist. After obtaining the bracelet of the Impure, he can now cast magic 3 times a day instead of just once. Our boy finishes a practice session and lets out a breath. He says good. He begins experimenting with his magic using the new phrases he discovered recently. He mutters to himself that it might have something to do with how and where he arranges the phrase array, but he is not completely sure yet. Something catches his attention just then. His spell hits the ground and leaves a deep crater in the surface. Evan remarks that Alan's magic sure got way stronger lately. Alan asks if that is really so. Evan's expression is sincere as he explains what he noticed. It never seems like Alan is a second circle mage anymore. His level of ability is on a completely different level compared to just a few months ago. Alan stares at the crater in the ground in front of him. He used gravity, which is a second circle magic spell. Even at maximum output, the spell should only create a small depression in the ground. But the crater in front of him is far deeper than it should be. Alan realizes it is not just his imagination. He really is getting stronger over time. But he cannot figure out why that is happening. He recalls that an increase in magical proficiency only improves accuracy and performance, but not raw power output. Phrases are closer to trigger boards that alter how spell attributes behave, so neither proficiency nor phrases explain the power boost he is experiencing. Something else entirely is going on here. Alan reviews his phrase array research chart to look for answers. He spent months studying phrases for mastery and recently has been using almost the same phrases in alternation. Just then, Evan calls out to him. He says Utia's letter just arrived. Alan thanks Evan and says he will go back inside to read it right away. Evan asks if he is going back inside already. Alan explains that he already used up all his magic for today, so there is nothing left to practice with. Alan's thoughts keep circling back to the mystery, though. There has to be a reason for his magic constantly getting stronger like this. He starts thinking about curses. A curse is an ancient ritual in which the caster sacrifices himself to place a curse on another person or on themselves. When inflicted, the cursed person receives a certain compensation in return for bearing it. But Alan shakes his head at the idea. There is no one around him from the east, so it cannot be that. He wonders if maybe it is some kind of divine faith working on him instead. Alan considers the idea of divine reward for a moment, but quickly dismisses it. He mutters that he did spend resources in the underworld, but that does not make any sense at all as an explanation. The guy shrugs and decides to just let it go for now. Sometimes you just have to forget about something and move on with your life. Nothing bad will happen because of it, right? In the Holy Kingdom of Rosario, the capital known as Rianel, the pure white city built in the name of the goddess of moon and peace Saronia. Outside the East Prayer House, a holy knight in gleaming armor approaches. He offers a formal greeting and says, "Greetings, sister." A gentle voice responds to her. She says, "And to you, Sir Roque," and asks if he has been well lately. Roque reports that there is a village hit by monsters out in the outskirts. However, he must show his respect first before anything else. This time they managed to save 8 lives from a small village located 3 days east by horseback. He looks at the sister with deep gratitude on his face and says it is all thanks to her. The sister shakes her head with a soft smile. She tells him it is not her doing at all. He is the one who saved those people out there. Roque's eyes fill with sincere emotion as he responds. He insists that she is the only one who taught him how to wield divine power in the first place. He will always be grateful to her for that. He adds that he is truly happy from the bottom of his heart about everything, but he must not forget about his duty either. Roque remembers the day everything changed for him. Weapons clattered against the stone floor around him. The sister stood before the despairing young trainee back then. She told him that if there is something he desires so much, he should try having faith in the moon. Roque asked what she meant by that. The moon? She simply smiled at him and told him he would figure it out once he actually tries it for himself. Roke recalls how desperate he was at that moment in his life. He was willing to do anything at all to change things. He prayed to the moon for a few days just as she told him to, and miraculously he learned how to wield divine power for the first time in his life. He was so happy about it, but then he fell for a moment of temptation and put his faith in Saronia the goddess instead. He heard that he may have stepped into the path of heresy by gaining power through the moon instead of through the goddess directly. However, all power borrowed from the gods works the same way regardless of the source. Even the artifacts blessed in the name of goddess Saronia shone bright in his hands when he used them. This proved that the divine power he gained is real and legitimate, no different from any other holy knight out there. Roke asked her directly about it. Why did she tell him to believe in the moon? The sister's red eyes glowed softly as she explained it to him. Faith comes from invisible belief, but that is too abstract for most people to grasp on their own. It is always easier to find belief in something you can actually see with your own eyes. She continued with warmth in her voice. The moon will always be with you no matter what. It is always there in the sky, unlike the goddess who cannot be seen by anyone. Roke's eyes widened with understanding at her words. He whispered that he sees it now. The goddess is not the moon itself, but the moon is a way for the doubtful to believe with certainty, a bridge between invisible faith and visible truth that anyone can look up and see. Roke bowed deeply and called out to Sister. He thanked her from the bottom of his heart for everything. The sister smiled and asked if he wanted to express his gratitude properly. She suggested they pray together. Roke agreed without any hesitation at all. He said he can do that over and over again gladly. The sister noted that he came just in time for the evening prayer and that people have already gathered inside. Footsteps echoed through the grand cathedral as they walked in. Rows of believers sat in reverent silence waiting. The chapel filled with purple and blue light streaming through the stained glass windows above. The atmosphere inside was sacred and still. The sister walked to the front of the congregation. She turned to face them all. She raised her staff and announced with a gentle smile on her face, "Now then, let us pray together." She looked out over the congregation with her crimson eyes glowing beneath the moonlight streaming through the glass above. She finished her sentence. "Let us pray to the she." The word hung in the air for just a moment before she spoke it. Great moon. Utia stood before the congregation of the Holy Kingdom bathed in moonlight from above. Her pink hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her red eyes burned with quiet devotion. This is Utia Bludia, sister of the Holy Kingdom Rosario. Beneath her gentle smile and humble robes, she leads an entire congregation in worship of the great moon. Alan opens Utia's latest letter and notes that nothing special stands out this time around. The letter is quite short, which means everyone is leading a good life out there. Our boy admits that this is a good thing to hear, but he has supported them for years now and still never met any of them face to face. A quiet loneliness crosses Alan's expression for a moment. He reasons that it is understandable from their perspective. He is just some mystery they have never actually seen before. Alan tells himself that he is probably just some nice guy to them and nothing more. A generous stranger who only ever helps from a distance and never shows up. He reminds himself that earning their affection is not his goal in any of this. Guiding them onto the right path is all that matters, and that mission is already complete. A faint sadness settles over Alan's face. He murmurs that there is no reason to feel this way about it at all. He lies back and closes his eyes in silence. A warm but bittersweet feeling fills Alan's chest as he lies there. He reflects that Utia is the only one who still writes to him regularly. It feels like raising 5 children and only the eldest daughter remembers his effort at the end of it. Alan leans back and declares that he is fine with everything. Just then Evan opens the door and asks if the Count is busy right now. Alan flinches and tells Evan not to scare him like that. Evan apologizes and mentions he forgot to bring up something from the investigation earlier. Evan's expression turns serious after that. He explains that he checked into all 5 of them as Alan requested. Some of them are making quite a name for themselves out there. Alan sits up with interest and asks what Evan found out about them. Evan announces that Radon has become a pirate. Alan freezes completely on the spot. Total confusion floods across Alan's face as question marks swirl around his head. He asks Evan to please elaborate on that for him. Evan nods and decides to start from the beginning of it. He explains that the ones making the most noise right now are Selarong and Dias. Evan reports that Selarong now holds a 32-win streak in the colony. That record is required for any fighter aiming to reach the rank of the strongest warriors there. Alan's eyes widen slightly in surprise at the number. He repeats it back. A 32-win streak is no small feat at all. Evan adds that the fighter with the longest streak in the colony is the Lion King, who holds a record of 41 consecutive wins. The colony relies on its most powerful individuals to maintain its military strength. Alan nods and points out that Selarong is only 9 wins away from the top now. He remarks that the surrounding kingdoms already think twice before picking a fight with the colony because of fighters like that. Evan's tone shifts as he brings up the next name on the list. He tells Alan that as for Dias, the news is just as impressive. Evan reveals that Dias and his Order the Eclipse have taken down one of the 8 barbarian chiefs. The fallen chief is Kurga of the Snowfield. Evan explains that the barbarian chiefs are the leaders who transform into monsters through ancient rituals. He asks Alan if he is familiar with them at all. Alan's expression darkens as old memories come back to him. He admits that he knows them very well. Back in the game, fighting the barbarians nearly gave him nightmares just thinking about it. Alan notes that at least he does not have to face them himself this time around. He adds that Deus and the Eclipse only dealt with one of the 5 remaining chiefs, so the situation is still manageable for now. He thinks it over and concludes that he does not need to worry about Deus anymore at this point. With this victory, the guy figures Deus is now standing at the same level as a masterclass swordsman. A small shudder runs through Alan just thinking about it. He mutters that the barbarian territories are the last place in the world he wants to visit. Evan moves on and mentions Rinna next. She now runs a shop in the Labyrinth City that specializes in the Black Imprint, which is a technique that enhances relics and their abilities. The Labyrinth City stretches out in the distance, looking busy and bustling with activity. Alan's brow twitches as a realization hits him. He already knows about Utia through her letters, so that leaves only one name unaccounted for. He leans forward and demands to know the main point already. He asks Evan directly if Radon has really become a pirate out there. He leans forward and demands to know the main point already. He asks Evan directly if Radon has really become a pirate out there. Evan nods and explains that since Radan has a talent for tracking and belongs to an aquatic race, Alan originally placed him near the coast of the port city Raxus. Evan's jaw tightens as he delivers the rest of it. But instead of becoming a treasure hunter like planned, Radan became the captain of the first archipelago, which is the biggest of the 7 pirate islands. Alan stares at Evan in disbelief. He insists that it is impossible and demands to know how Radan managed to pull that off. The pirates of the 7 archipelagos are not the kind of people anyone just walks up to and defeats. Alan presses his temples and walks Evan through his original plan step by step. He explains that Radan is good at tracking things down, and since Radan is a dark sea being, he can move freely underwater. On top of that, there are ancient relics buried beneath the ocean near Raxus. That is why he recommended Radan to become a treasure hunter in the first place. A heavy silence fills the room as Alan pauses. But Radan did not follow the plan at all. Alan's frustration bleeds through as he talks about it. He explains that Radan somehow went from retrieving relics to conquering an entire island. The situation escalated far beyond anything he ever imagined possible. Evan adds one more detail on top of everything. Every single captain of the 7 archipelagos is a superhuman. Exasperation creases Alan's brow at the news. Evan goes on to say that the captains have never lost a naval battle to humans ever. Their combined military might rivals that of entire empires. Our boy cannot help but press his hand to his forehead at this point. Alan explains that he himself also wanted a good relic from that area. He ended up spending a ridiculous number of hours grinding the treasure hunter minigame just to get one back in the day. Evan concludes that Radan must have gathered powerful relics from the seabed and used them to challenge the previous captain for his position on the island. Alan falls completely silent after hearing that. He covers his eyes with one hand and lets the weight of everything just settle on him. In the heart of the Principality of Korkia stands the gigantic maritime city of Raxus. Beyond the city's coast lie the 7 paradises of pirates, and the biggest of them all is the first archipelago. The first archipelago stands under the rule of a powerful captain who received the Heavenly King's protection through wealth. He held absolute dominion over the largest island. A cold gleam of steel flashes in the light. And here stands the person who defeated him and took his place. Radahn struck down the former captain and claimed the title for himself. He became the new captain of the first archipelago just like that. Radahn stands at the edge of a cliff overlooking the island below. He lets out a quiet hum and gazes across the sprawling pirate settlement. Doubt creeps into Radahn's mind as he stands there. He admits to himself that he just does not know. He asks himself one simple question. What exactly is the Great Moon to him? Radahn reflects that he was never interested in the Great Moon at all. He never really gave it much thought before. At first, the Great Moon was just a name with no real meaning behind it for him. A complicated mix of gratitude and confusion stirs inside Radahn as he thinks about it. He acknowledges that the Great Moon saved his life, but even knowing that true loyalty never took root in his heart, he simply followed along because Utia told him to do it. Radahn admits to himself that it always felt more like he was following Utia's orders than anything else. Working under the title of Blue Moon never felt like devotion to the Great Moon for him. So when a direct order from the Great Moon arrived one day, Radahn did not know what to make of it at all. Frustration hardened Radahn's gaze as he read through the letter. He did not understand this order at all. He demanded to know what the point of becoming a treasure hunter even was. The order stirred nothing but revulsion inside him. All he could think about was starting his revenge as soon as possible. The black things that massacred his clan still walked free out there. Radahn's memory drifts back to a time before the nightmare happened. His people, the Sea God clan, had been living peacefully on an island that no one even knew about. Rage and grief surged through Radahn's chest as the images flood back into his mind. Then the hunters came. The ones they call the Black Things descended on the island without any warning and tore everything apart. On the continent, Radahn barely managed to escape to the hunters caught up to his exhausted parents. The damn hunters killed them both right in front of him. And then they sold Radahn as a slave after that. A child of the Sea God clan stripped of everything and thrown into chains. Radahn's expression goes hollow as he recalls the feeling. He remembers thinking that becoming a treasure hunter had nothing to do with his promised revenge. The gift from the Great Moon made no sense to him at the time. A lone figure stands at the edge of a dark shoreline silhouetted against the endless sea stretching out before him. Lights and explosions burst across the distant sky. The sound of celebration echoes across the water toward him. Irritation flickers across Radahn's face. He mutters and wonders why it is so noisy over there. He turns his head toward the commotion and lets out a quiet hum. A grand celebration fills the plaza on the other side. Figures raise their arms in triumph as energy crackles through the air around them. They shout that only the chosen great pirate can receive the Heavenly King's protection through wealth. The chosen captains of the 7 archipelagos hold their titles forever. Cold fury settles behind Radahn's eyes as everything clicks into place for him. That is when he found the bastards who killed his parents. He watched them revel in their stolen power and thought to himself that they finally gained it. Radahn pieced together the truth after that. The Heavenly King's protection that all the captains boast about is not some divine blessing at all. It is power ripped from the bodies of his people. Only through a sacred ritual that uses parts of the Sea God clan's bodies can someone receive the power granted by the Sea God clan, and every single captain of the 7 archipelagos wields that power. The captains did not earn their strength through training. They butchered the Sea God clan and harvested their flesh for it. Fireworks paint the sky above the celebration. The captains and their followers cheer as if nothing in the world is wrong around them. The sound of laughter and celebration fades into the background as Radahn's focus narrows on what he has to do. Radahn's voice drops to a low growl. Those damned hunters split his parents' bodies apart. Raw hatred burns behind Radahn's eyes as the full weight of the truth crashes down on him. They split his parents' bodies into 7 pieces, 1 piece for each captain, 1 piece for each island. The moon hangs over the dark sea as fireworks light up the sky above. Radahn stands at the shoreline and wonders how the Great Moon could have possibly known about any of this. He never talked about his past to anyone before. Radahn's mind races as the pieces come together in his head. He whispers that it is almost as if the Great Moon arranged an opportunity for revenge in order to fulfill a promise he made. A deep shudder runs through Radahn's body as the fireworks reflect off the water in silence around him. Radahn gazes toward the flickering celebration lights in the distance while standing alone on the dark shore. Radan admits to himself that he cannot execute his revenge right away, though. Fierce determination hardens behind Radan's eyes as he thinks it through. He explains that the captains are superhumans who wield the power of the sea god. Taking them down is no simple task at all. A spark of realization crosses Radan's face just then. He mutters that if everything has been intended from the start, then there must be more to all of this. Radan holds the pendant in his hand and examines it closely. He reasons that if everything is deliberate, then there must be a reason for this gift as well. Awe fills Radan's expression as the pendant glows beneath the moonlight. He declares that the great moon must have assigned everything accordingly for him. Radan clutches the pendant tight and lifts his gaze toward the moon above. He murmurs that the great moon orchestrated the foundation and structure of the revenge itself from the very beginning. Resolve burns in Radan's chest as he sprints across the sand and dives headfirst into the ocean below. Radan slices through the water and pushes deeper into the dark blue depths beneath the surface. He swims further down as the ocean floor comes into view, and the pressure keeps building all around him. Wonder lights up Radan's face when he sees it. The gift from the great moon is the spectacles of Amrita. The relic allows him to identify and locate relics buried deep inside the sea with ease. Radan discovers that the specific relics he finds are able to make up for his lack of raw force against the captains of the islands. He surfaces from the water and steps onto the beach soaked but triumphant. Shame and gratitude twist together on Radan's face as he stands there dripping. He admits that it was foolish of him to have been merely grateful all this time without understanding. Radan looks up at the moon and declares that the great moon fulfilled his promise after all. Radan states that the great moon not only pushed the targets of his revenge right before him where he could reach them. A fierce reverence swells in Radan's chest. He adds that the great moon also gave him the power to carry the revenge out with his own hands. Radan announces that he now fully understands what the great moon meant by the order written on the letter. He asks himself what the true intention behind it all really is. Radan answers his own question out loud. The true intention is for him to carry out his revenge and take control of all 7 archipelagos. A memory surfaces in his mind. Utia's voice echoes firm and clear inside Radan's head. She reminds him to never forget. She tells him to take everything. Everything is for the great moon. Radan listened in silence back then. He reflects that a sentence which once stirred nothing inside him is now starting to change everything. Deep emotion wells up behind Radan's eyes. Gradually those words etch themselves into his heart. Everything. The words become a light of trust that fills the emptiness inside him completely. A thin smile crosses Radan's face. He speaks with quiet certainty in his voice. Everything is for the great moon. Radan stands alone on the shore beneath the full moon, with the ocean stretching endlessly before him. 3 months pass after that. The oppressive heat recedes, and autumn arrives, painting the leaves red across the land. Autumn is the season of Asteria's biennial grand social gathering, and Alan notes that he is forced to participate in it. He boards the carriage with little enthusiasm. A quiet weariness settles over our boy's face as the carriages rumble down the road toward the gathering. As scheduled, the carriages of the Krylo and Eodorn families join his convoy for safety against bandits along the way. Alan lets out a quiet murmur of acknowledgement and leans back in his seat. Alan explains that traveling together prevents any bandit trouble along the way for all of them. Irritation flickers across Alan's face. He grumbles that it is such an annoying and strange custom to have. However, what he discovers in the evening turns out to be far worse than any bandits could have been. A noble sneers and asks Count Palacio how he dares bring only one escort with him. Another mocks him and suggests his finances must be in shambles, since he got his position by coincidence. Alan discovers that the nobles themselves pose a bigger problem than the bandits. Loud and shameless laughter erupts all around Alan. He quietly thinks to himself that he would rather they just talked behind his back like normal people do. Alan understands why they feel this way about him, though. The imperial authority of the Palacio name comes from dominating the vast underworld of the East. That authority was built entirely on wealth drawn from the underworld and nothing else. Exhaustion crosses Alan's expression, but he long since dismissed his underworld forces and gained new revenue through other means. He is making enough of a living without the underworld now. And so the current state of Palatio begins to shift in the eyes of the nobility around him. The fact that Palatio, once feared as the mastermind behind the shadows of the East, can no longer bring even the minimum number of escorts to the imperial gathering starts to define his reputation. This has become an accepted fact by now. Alan already knows that he has been demoted from the mastermind of the county to a lucky fool in the eyes of the nobles around him. A noble grins and tells Alan how sad it is to see him run out of money like this. He offers to help with a mocking laugh. Alan did not expect them to be this openly rude about it. Annoyance tightens Alan's jaw. He mutters that these nobles are starting to cross a line with him. He notices something and pauses. They are victims of Palatio's past, he realizes. The Krylo and Eodorn families once served as errand runners for the Palatio household. Alan takes in the sight of the two families whose grudge now fuels all of their mockery toward him. He concludes that they are just venting the humiliation they once suffered under the Palatio name. He finds it somewhat understandable when he thinks about it, but Alan points out that he is not the one who humiliated them in the first place. That was the previous count's doing, not his. A weary grin tugs at the guy's lips. He compares the whole situation to dealing with internet haters and notes that they are still going at it. And Len decides it is best to just ignore them entirely and move on. He turns to Evan and asks where he has been this whole time. Evan holds up a bundle with a bright grin on his face and explains that he just picked this up from the kitchen. He presents some roasted corn. Ellen's eyes light up and he exclaims that they look amazing. Alan declares that staple crops are always a blessing and begins eating right away without hesitation. The Krylo and Eodorn nobles keep shouting that all the underworld soldiers vanished because of his incompetence and that his carriage looks as neglected as he does. Alan hardly notices any of it. Pure contentment fills Alan's expression as he takes another bite of the corn. He murmurs that it is so good. He adds that it would be even better with some butter on it. A building stands quietly beneath the moonlit sky in the distance. The north, an endless land of bitter cold. This frozen wasteland is swallowed up by barbarians. In this place only cursed grayish light exists, as if to say that there is no life here at all. A wounded figure groans in the snow. He snarls that those Caliburn bastards know nothing of honor. Fury burns in the fallen warrior's eyes. This is the great Klakan, and he is one of the 8 barbarian chiefs. For the barbarians who worship battle-a-death in combat is the highest honor imaginable. Klakan carried that belief to his core, his entire life. However, the one who defeated him is a knight of Caliburn, who claimed to want an honorable duel but fought with treachery instead. The memory of the cowardly ambush flashes through Klakan's fading mind as he lies there. Klekin collapses in the snow among the fallen, and his strength drains away from him. A voice calls out through the blizzard and asks what happened to the chief of the snowfield. Klekin looks up through blurred vision. Agony twists across Klekin's expression. He responds that he met a sorrowful fate and that it is a fate unworthy of a warrior like him. Outrage erupts from the voice. The speaker calls the act despicable and demands to know how humans can commit such a cowardly deed against a barbarian chief. A divine presence stirs in the frozen air around them. A voice echoes from beyond the void. "Brother, call me." Da the G. Klekin lies on the blood-stained snow surrounded by the shadows of fallen warriors. The voice commands him to call its great name. Darkness envelops the frozen wasteland as snow falls in silence all around. The voice declares that the name they worship is its own. Klekin's lips tremble as he whispers a single word. Ultul Rus. The ground beneath Klekin begins to shake as raw power floods through the frozen earth. Klekin's body trembles violently as the god's presence descends upon the snowfield. A massive figure begins to materialize from the darkness above them. A trembling voice calls out to the great god Ultulrus and begs to speak the honorable name. The barbarian musters every last ounce of faith he has and calls the name once more. He declares that they dare to invoke the honorable name of the great god Ultulrus. A wide and terrible smile splits across the face of the descending god. Ultulrus answers with a single word. Yes, the god's voice thunders across the frozen wasteland. Ultulrus declares that he shall grant their desire. During the travel to the grand social gathering, the Krylo and Eodorn families insult Alan at every chance they get. The other families find the behavior unbearable, but nobody does anything to stop it. Alan thanks them with a playful grin, and his voice is dripping with sarcasm. He notes that not falling for bait is a fundamental rule of any game. Calm confidence settles in Alan's eyes. He states plainly that he just ignores them and moves on. A knight calls for the group to rest for the night. Everyone sets up camp along the road. The evening turns lively as the group plays rock, paper, scissors together. Our boy chats casually with Evan about how things are going. Meanwhile, Count Krylo pulls Count Aodorn aside away from the others. He reveals that he confirmed with his artifact that the foolish brat only brought the one knight with him. Count Aodorn nods and declares that the rumor is true after all. They agree that they can put the plan into action right away. Greed flashes across both of their faces. Count Krylo savors the thought and remarks that the days of bowing down as subordinates are finally over for them. Count Aodorn adds that they can finally get a taste of the astronomical amounts of money and power that flow through the underworld. Cruel smiles spread across both their faces. Count Krylo suggests that once they take control of the underworld, they should give Alan a little gift as thanks. Count Aodorn laughs and agrees and praises what a fine personality Krylo has. Just as the two counts finish their private conversation, a sound cuts through the darkness. Both of them freeze on the spot. A violent slash tears through the night. A knight draws his sword and shouts a warning to everyone. The cry rings out across the camp. Monsters. Red eyes glow from deep within the dark forest around them. Knights and mercenaries rush to formation. A wizard casts a light spell and launches an orb of light into the sky. The forest is suddenly illuminated all around them. What the light reveals catches everyone off guard. The forest is filled with goblins. A knight scoffs that they are just goblins and that they are common monsters that any novice can handle easily. A second knight points out that goblins are such weak creatures that no one in the forest even bothers worrying about them. But the moment of relief shatters in an instant. Something is very wrong with these ones. The goblins standing before them are covered in purple crystals growing out of their bodies. They are massive and grotesque, and they look nothing like any goblin the soldiers have ever seen before. Terror settles in as the full scope of the horde becomes visible to everyone. If their numbers keep swelling like this, even seasoned fighters are in serious trouble. Panic erupts among the mercenaries. Someone shouts that everyone on watch outside is already dead. Another screams in disbelief and demands to know what is happening right now. A mercenary stammers that he has never seen goblins that look like this before in his life. The creatures are larger and covered in crystals and far more aggressive than any normal goblin. A knight shouts that the goblins are bigger than any recorded variant of the species. He asks if they are some kind of mutation. Another knight senses something deeper going on. He warns that the goblins also carry mana inside their bodies now. That changes everything about the fight. Dread fills every face as the realization sinks in. The creature's physical abilities are completely different from any goblin they have ever encountered before. The goblins charge forward. The mutated goblins slam into the front line with terrifying force. Soldiers brace themselves and strike back at them. Raw panic settles across the battlefield as goblins overpower several mercenaries. The creatures are faster and stronger than anyone expected them to be. The soldiers fight desperately to hold the line as the horde continues to press forward without stopping. A massive goblin towers over the rest and roars into the night with purple crystals jutting from its skull. Out of nowhere, a wall of stone erupts from the ground and cuts through the goblin ranks. A translucent barrier shimmers to life behind it. The wizard stares in shock at what he sees. He identifies the spells as a third circle rock wall and a second circle shield. He demands to know who among them is casting this right now. A calm voice cuts through the chaos. Enhancement. The wall of stone begins to glow. The voice speaks again. Compression. The translucent sphere starts shrinking rapidly and pulls the stone wall inward with it. Determination burns behind Alan's eyes as the compressed magic distorts the air around him. The sphere collapses into a dense cracking mass. The ground trembles beneath the weight of the compressed energy. Everyone watches in stunned silence. Footsteps echo through the quiet. A figure walks forward completely unfazed by the carnage around him. The nobles and knights realize that the figure is Count Palladio. He approaches without a trace of fear in his expression at all. The guy raises his hand and speaks. Vacuum. The compressed sphere shrinks even further into a rough, rock-like ball. The energy crackles and pulses as it reaches critical density inside the sphere. Alan utters the final word. Return to the origins. The bracelet of the impure on his wrist begins to emit a faint gray light. A violent explosion tears outward like a shotgun blast and rips dozens of goblins apart in an instant. The compressed stone fragments shred through the goblin horde. Bodies fly in every direction as the blast clears an entire section of the forest. Silence falls across the battlefield after the explosion. The debris settles as the remaining goblins hesitate. Alan turns to face the stunned crowd. His voice is calm and steady. He tells them to stop standing around in a daze and to get ready to fight. The knights and mercenaries snap out of their shock. As if hypnotized, they raise their swords. The fear that gripped them moments earlier vanishes completely. The soldiers charge into the remaining goblin horde with renewed strength. Steel clashes against mutated flesh as the knights cut down the creatures one by one. Evan leaps into the thick of the fight and his blade carves through multiple goblins in a single swing. The battle rages on as the soldiers push the horde back further into the trees. Evan strikes the final blow, and the last of the goblins falls to the ground. The soldiers catch their breath under the first light of dawn. The sun breaks over the horizon. Dawn paints the autumn forest in soft gold. A soldier collapses to his knees and shouts that it is finally over. The surviving mercenaries and knights gasp for air, drenched in blood and sweat. One of the nobles stares toward Alan in the distance and mutters to himself. He asks who that man really is. Another noble echoes the same thought with wide eyes. Alan stands calmly among the aftermath, with green energy lingering around his wrist. The nobles watch him in awe and disbelief. The moment no one is watching, Alan lets out a massive sigh. He whispers that he almost died back there. He calculates the situation inside his head quickly. He can cast magic 3 or 4 times at most. After that, he is just a defenseless count with nothing left. Relief washes over our boy's face as the danger finally sinks in. He admits to himself that from the middle of the battle onward, he was nothing but a completely useless, miserable count standing behind everyone else. Evan approaches and asks if the count is hurt anywhere. Alan tells him that he is fine. Evan presses further and notes that losing the ability to fight is the most terrifying experience of all. He asks again if Alan is really fine. Alan reassures Evan that he truly is fine. But his mind shifts to the real problem at hand. He wonders why a divine descent just occurred. He explains that divine descent is a bizarre phenomenon that appears when an outer god is about to descend upon the world. The affected monsters become stronger and more ferocious because of it. Alan's expression grows grim. He mutters that this should not be possible at all. He reasons that divine descent is a clear sign that the outer gods are about to come down upon this land. If they actually descend, then entire nations could collapse under their power. Deep concern darkens Alan's face. He knows that the 5 sins never awakened into the deadly sins in this timeline, so this event makes no sense at all. Alan wrestles with the question in his head. If the children did not trigger the descent, then what exactly caused this problem to happen? Something beyond his knowledge is already in motion out there. He clenches his fist and falls silent while lost in thought about what lies ahead of them. But rest is not an option for him right now. Alan reminds himself that he needs to collect information as soon as he arrives here. Alan stares ahead in silence with his mind heavy with worry about the divine descent and the future ahead. A brief pause. Then a man with a distinguished mustache appears in the crowd. They're scared of what he's saying. The next day, the ducal house of Rotier, Alan and Evan finally arrive at the gates of the gathering. Alan lets out a tired groan and mumbles that they are here at last. The two stand before the grand entrance of the ducal estate. After so many hardships on the road, the great social gathering has finally begun. A quiet weariness settles in Alan's eyes. He murmurs that he just wants to go home and sleep. The Duke Rotegre estate is the perfect place for a grand social gathering. Everything in sight gleams with gold, from the chandeliers all the way down to the wine glasses. Alan observes that the purpose of this place is to show off wealth on a grand scale. It does not matter whether anyone finds it appropriate or not. Laughter fills the golden ballroom. A noble remarks that Duke Rotegre sure knows how to display his competence to everyone. A noble woman fusses over another guest and coos about health and appearances. The atmosphere is lively but superficial. Alan overhears various conversations and reminds himself not to try mingling with these nobles. He decides it is not worth the effort at all. Quiet resolve settles in Alan's eyes. He scans the room while keeping his expression neutral. A familiar voice calls out from behind him. Alan turns with a raised brow. Count Krylo and Count Eodorn approach with nervous smiles on their faces. They greet Alan warmly and ask if he can spare a moment for them. The two counts present a gift to him. Count Krylo offers homemade meat from his territory and insists Alan try some of it. Count Eodorn adds that he wants to make closer rapport and offers support to Palatio territory going forward. Confusion crosses Alan's face. He mutters that this is a complete turnaround from their behavior just days ago on the road. The two counts exchange panicked glances behind their forced smiles. One whispers to the other that this is an emergency. Fear and regret flood both of their expressions. They agree that they should never have messed with him in the first place. A flashback to a day ago, right after the goblin battle. The events that changed everything begin to unfold. A soldier stammers in disbelief. He asks if the others also saw what just happened out there. Another gasps. He can barely get the word out. Magic. Baron Amon's personal mage steps forward, visibly shaken by what he witnessed. He announces that they have questions for Count Palatio. He asks for a moment to speak privately. The mage explains that the spell Alan cast is not an ordinary spell at all. A third circle technique like that, thrown out so casually, is beyond what any second circle mage should be able to do. Shock radiates from the mage's face. He identifies the spell as second circle by classification, but insists that the caliber of it easily surpasses that rank. The mage declares that the magic has to be at least fourth circle level, and possibly even higher than that. Count Palatio is far more powerful than anyone realized. The truth spreads quickly through the camp after that. Count Palatio, the one everyone wrote off as a lucky fool, has been hiding true strength behind his apathy all along. And behind that nonchalance lies the cold and cruel nature of the Palatio bloodline. The Krylo and Eodorn counts go pale as they realize what they have done. They recall how they planned to seize the underworld and even threatened Alan with a little gift. Terror fills their eyes. They stammer that it cannot be true and that they have already gone too far with everything. Count Krylo drops to his knees and screams. They have to beg for forgiveness. If Alan gets angry and orders his people to eliminate them, there is no hope of survival for either of them. Both counts throw themselves at Alan's feet with faces pressed to the ground. They plead for mercy with desperate voices. Our boy stares down at the groveling nobles in front of him. He notes that he cannot even imagine what sort of wrong leads a person to act like this. Alan clears his throat and admits that even though he is usually merciful, they have crossed the line this time around. Cold intent flashes in Alan's eyes as he declares that he will handle this himself. Evan glances sideways and quietly mutters a single word. Petty. The two counts tremble and whimper on the ground. They are convinced they are dead meat. Alan walks through the venue snacking on food from a tray. He tells Evan to take the information request to the guild while he scouts the room for useful conversations. Alan notices two nobles chatting in the corner. His curiosity is piqued by what they are saying. He enhances his hearing ability with mana and tunes into their conversation from across the room. A delighted spark crosses Alan's expression as the conversation turns interesting. One noble asks the other if he heard about Duke Altia and Count Zenonia. The other nods and confirms that the rumor about them forming a faction is being discussed everywhere. Alan listens closely. He cannot help himself from picking up every single word they say. Alan notes that he does not even need to worry about the Altia-Zenonia alliance. The two notorious families never got along before. He reasons that their alliance will not last long anyway. The two families have fundamentally different methods and goals from each other. But then the conversation takes a turn. One noble mentions that there is something even more alarming that everyone should know about. The noble leans in and whispers that the head of the new faction is not Duke Altia or Count Zenonia. Alan's attention locks on the conversation completely. He wonders who the faction head could be if it is not those two. The noble drops the name, the Palatio. Alan freezes mid-bite. The head of the faction is Count Palatio. Total confusion hits Alan like a wall of bricks. Question marks flood his head all at once. He sputters in disbelief. He demands to know what kind of nonsense this is. The guy frantically runs through his memories trying to make sense of it. He met Duke Altia only once when she was still a young lady. He encountered the daughter of Zenonia 3 times at most. He points out that the current Count Zenonia never even met him once in person. There is zero basis for this rumor at all. Alan wonders how a rumor this baseless managed to spread in the first place. He stares ahead in utter disbelief. A voice interrupts his spiral of confusion. Someone calls his name, Count Palatio. Alan turns toward the voice and finds a man staring at him with an arrogant grin on his face. The man gives a theatrical bow. He introduces himself as Karhan, the third son of Duke Kamalan of the Ashtalon Kingdom. He declares that it is nice to meet Alan. Karhin adds that most nobles from other kingdoms attend the gathering out of courtesy. He implies that Alan falls short of that standard. Alan blinks and introduces himself politely. He is Count Palatio. Karhin does not hold back at all. He remarks that he heard about Alan purely through rumor and nothing more. Our boy reads the insult clearly. Annoyance flickers behind Alan's calm expression. He mutters under his breath that these days even twisted donuts can talk. Karhin's face contorts in anger at the remark. He snaps and demands to know if Alan is mocking the Asteria Kingdom by extension. Karhin blinks in surprise and quickly denies it. He explains that mocking is not his intention at all. Karhin pauses and is caught off guard by the reaction. He realizes he expected an easy target, but the whole situation feels odd to him. Vanity takes over after that. Karhin puffs out his chest and introduces himself fully. He is Karhin Kamalan, a gorgeous and romantic man of immense wealth and prestige. He declares that no woman could ever refuse him. He glances around the room and spots several noble women nearby. He begins evaluating their appearances out loud for everyone to hear. Karhin stares blankly at the spectacle in front of him. He notices a noble woman nearby reacting to Karhin's crude remarks. Karhin's mother is referenced in passing. He preens and announces that it is time to make his appeal. Karhin loudly declares that he wants to discuss marriage with the daughter of Rotagray. Shock ripples through the room at his announcement. The daughter of Rotagray reacts in disbelief. Somehow the marriage proposal gets cancelled almost immediately after it is made. Karhin fumes about the rejection. He decides to find someone to take his frustration out on instead. His eyes land on Alan across the room. He mutters that he heard Count Palatio is a pushover with no connections and no money. A cruel grin spreads across Karhin's face. He declares that Alan is the perfect target to vent his frustration on. But before Karhin can make his move, a sharp voice cuts in from behind. A powerful noble asks if Karhin has lost his respect. The noble reminds Karhin that the Ashtalon Kingdom is a long-standing ally of Asteria. Insulting an Asterian noble carries consequences. No matter how indifferent Alan is to politics, he recognizes these three figures immediately. Alan identifies them silently in his head. One belongs to the noble faction. Another is Marca Marcano of the royalist faction. The third represents the moderate faction. Marca Marcano states plainly that he does not understand why Karhin is acting so disrespectfully toward a fellow noble. The three nobles represent the central axis of the Asteria Kingdom. The implication is clear to everyone watching. If Duke Kamalan of Ashtalon is looking down on Asteria through his son's behavior, it will not be tolerated by anyone. One of the nobles demands to know if Duke Kamalan truly looks down on them as a kingdom. Panic floods across Karhin's face. He insists that is not true at all. The noble presses harder. He asks why Karhin called a noble of their kingdom by name so disrespectfully like that. Karhin stammers that he made a mistake. The noble faction figure continues to pressure him and points out that the discussion requires more than just empty apologies. Karhin breaks down entirely after that. He sobs and can only repeat that he is sorry over and over. Alan watches everything unfold with quiet amusement and notes that the voice sounds strangely familiar to him. Karhin drops to his knees with tears streaming down his face. He begs them to forgive his disrespect. The three nobles turn their attention to Alan after that. They ask if he is all right. Alan confirms that he is fine, but the real surprise hits him next. The three nobles begin discussing how the social gathering is heating up now that Palatio joined alongside Duke Altia and Count Zenonia. Alan processes what they are saying to him. They believe that the combined power of Palatio and Altia and Zenonia makes an overwhelming force together. He realizes the rumor has already taken hold everywhere. Noble after noble approaches Alan after that. They mention hearing about his magic research. One says he gathered a pretty good artifact collection as well. Alan stands in bewildered silence. He wonders if he should just tell everyone that the whole thing is a misunderstanding. But the words never leave his mouth. The nobles line up to offer gifts to him. One presents an artifact that can contain mana. Another insists that Alan accept his gift as well. Alan considers telling them the truth but decides against it in the end. He tells himself to slap his feet on the ground and cry later about it. For now, the rumor works in his favor regardless of how it started. At dawn, the setting shifts to Duke Rotegra's annex building. A figure in the shadows asks how it went. The response comes quickly. Thankfully, Alan accepted the gift from them. The voice explains the significance of what happened. Light gifts between nobles signify a simple greeting and nothing more. But important materials like artifacts carry much deeper meaning behind them. For a person looking to enter a faction, presenting a gift to the faction head is a formal declaration of allegiance to that faction. The shadowy figure nods with satisfaction at the news. He is glad to hear about the acceptance. A noble thanks Marquis Elia for the help with everything. Another voice welcomes Marquis Marcano formally. They declare that they now share the same purpose going forward. The faction quietly grows behind the scenes with Alan's name sitting at its center whether he likes it or not. A beautiful woman in a dark dress and elegant hat stands in the moonlight outside. The Duke's castle in Rotegra holds many mansions and all of them were built for his concubines. If being rich is a sin, then this man deserves capital punishment for it. A beautiful woman in a dark dress and elegant hat sits across from a man in a dimly lit room. She states that she is glad they share the same goal. She asks what the others had to say about the arrangement. The man by the window replies that it is an honor for him as well. He confirms that the others all willingly accepted the terms. Duke Altia, known for her reclusive nature, makes a discreet visit and tips off only a select few nobles about the faction. She carefully selects the necessary cards for her side. The chosen nobles pass the rite of passage through sincere gifts and bribes to the right people. Everything is calculated down to the last detail. The rumors spread like drifting clouds across the social gathering. The political current moves exactly as Altia planned it to. A determined expression crosses the face of a noble watching from the side. He declares that this is clearly the current of politics at work right now. He vows to catch this opportunity before it passes. The faction leader behind the curtain finishes her work. Now the pieces are set and the moves can begin. Day 4 of the banquet. For some reason, our boy keeps receiving more and more free gifts from nobles all around the gathering. Alan figures the gifts must be related to the faction rumors going around. But he is not one to resist free things. He grabs everything he can carry. Arms full of presents, Alan marches through the venue like a man on a mission. A familiar voice calls out from behind him. "Count!" Relief flashes across Alan's face as he spots Evan approaching. He asks why Evan looks so surprised. Evan announces that he is back from the Information Guild. He has urgent news to share. Evan reports that an outer god appeared in the northern region. Alan's expression changes instantly. Alan processes the information quickly. Caliburn is in an absolute state of chaos right now. Evan explains that investigations are underway to deal with the situation. The northern forces are scrambling to respond to it. Alan asks about the person he is looking for. Evan confirms the target is located in northern Ashkelon. A sharp look of determination crosses Alan's face. He decides on the spot. They are heading to Caliburn right now. Evan hesitates and asks why they need to leave so suddenly. Alan tells him they can discuss the details on the way and orders him to pack up immediately. Evan nods. He nods again and confirms that he understands. The door shuts behind them. Alan stands alone for a moment in the room. Dread fills Alan's chest as he stands there. He whispers that he truly wishes this never happened. The threat is clear in his mind now. Catastrophic beings rivaling the 5 deadly sins, the outer gods. If they descend, then everything changes. Alan rattles off the dangers in his head. There are at least 5 major threats, and at least 4 of them cannot be ignored. He mutters that he did not expect this to happen so fast. A heavy sigh escapes his lips. All of his plans are based on the original game timeline, but with an outer god descending early like this, everything falls apart. Worry darkens Alan's expression. He reasons that the entire kingdom will eventually fall apart. If the barrier breaks, then his peaceful life is over in a second. Alan admits that he did think of a plan for this, but the odds are not in his favor at all. He recalls from the game that after descending an outer god takes several months to stabilize before fully wielding divine power. During that window, they are vulnerable to attack. Waiting for that moment of weakness is the best course of action. It is a narrow window, but it is all they have to work with. The guy clenches his fist. He tells himself he has to do it anyway, even if success is not guaranteed. This is the only way forward. A softer thought crosses his mind just then. He wonders what that child would like as a gift. A week later, a knight calls out from below. "Captain." Deus stands at the balcony of his estate in Caliburn, with his expression unreadable. He glances down at the knight and replies, "Vice Captain." The vice captain responds with a firm salute. "Yes, sir." Deus instructs him to tell the others that their next scheduled patrol of the nearby territory will be delayed by 2 weeks, a small northern village in the Ashkelon kingdom. Alan arrives with Evan and scans the area around them. He mutters that he did not expect to find the boy this quickly. His eyes lock on a figure in the distance. A cheerful voice rings out across the village square. "Hello." Alan stares at the boy with blue hair waving enthusiastically at him. He notes that the kid definitely stands out from everyone else. This is Elawan, the protagonist of the turn-based roguelike RPG Psychedelia. Alan blinks and thinks to himself that a protagonist is still a protagonist no matter what world they are in. The boy looks exactly like the game illustration, but he pauses for a second. He is a boy, right? Elawan tilts his head and asks if Alan knows who he is. He explains that he just wants to greet a stranger passing through. His name is Elawan. Alan watches the boy speak with that bright, infectious energy of his. No matter how different this world is from the game, the main character is still the main character. Alan observes that in the end, Elawan will grow far stronger and more famous than anyone in this world. He tells the boy he loves his positivity. Without hesitation, Alan pulls something out. He says one word, "Here, take this." A flash of gold shines in the sunlight. Elawan's eyes go wide. He stammers and asks if that is real gold he is looking at. Alan turns his head and calls Evan. Evan steps forward. He confirms with a single word, "Yes." Evan drops a massive pile of boxes and bags and equipment right in front of the stunned boy. The ground shakes under the weight of it all. Elawan stares at the mountain of supplies with question marks floating above his head. Alan gestures toward the pile and declares that everything here now belongs to Elawan. All of it is his. Elawan can barely speak. He asks why Alan is giving him all of this stuff. Our boy smiles and answers plainly. It is an investment in his future. He brought everything that will help the boy survive the early stages. He tells Elawan that he will be huge in the future, so he should grow up quickly and defeat the dangerous enemies out there in his place. Alan turns to leave, satisfied with his contribution to the boy. He pauses and hopes the boy likes him now. He glances at Evan and asks if that is enough for the time being. Alan introduces himself properly for the first time. He is Count Palatio. He tells Elawan to remember the name of the person who helped him when he was still nobody. Elawan's eyes fill with gratitude. He shouts after the departing carriage that he is Count, and promises he will remember this for the rest of his life. The carriage door shuts. Alan leans back and mutters that the boy is already growing on him. Evan glances at Alan and asks why they are in such a rush to leave the village. Alan explains that he does not remember the game protagonist being quite this cheerful. The dark fantasy setting usually produces grittier characters than this. Evan notes that it is a smart boy who quickly understands what Alan wants without needing a lengthy explanation from him. Alan agrees with that. He is in a hurry and does not have time to slowly build a relationship with the boy, so he took the direct approach instead. He mentions that just in case he left a protective enchantment on auto-defend mode around the village for safety. Evan adds that the child seems remarkably talented for his age. He sensed dense mana flowing around the boy, and despite the plain clothing, it looks like Elawan is already wearing artifacts on him. Alan nods slowly at that. He admits that he felt the mana as well when they were close. He recalls from the game that Elawan originally lived alone with nothing, and started his adventure from scratch with no help. Alan recognizes that giving the protagonist this much support so early might become another butterfly effect. It will make this world even more different from the game, especially because Elawan is the main character of the story. Alan recognizes that giving the protagonist this much support so early might become another butterfly effect. It will make this world even more different from the game, especially because Elawan is the main character of the story. But Alan shrugs it off in the end. As long as he preserves his own peaceful life, that is all that matters to him. The stronger Elawan grows, the better it is for everyone involved. Alan freezes mid-thought. Wait, kind personality. Alan shifts in his seat and quietly brings up a different topic. He asks Evan about Deus. Nervousness tightens Alan's expression. He asks Evan if he thinks Deus would even want to meet him. He never expected the circumstances to lead to a face-to-face meeting like this. Evan pauses for a long moment before answering. He answers uncertainly. He guesses so. Maybe. The carriage rumbles onward through the autumn countryside. Evan asks why Alan bought so many miscellaneous items on the way here. Alan replies that these are gifts he plans to give to his future vassal. 10 days later, in the capital of Caliburn, known as Kertham, at the northern gate of Kertham, Alan's face scrunches up in pure exhaustion as he lets out a massive yawn. Evan groans that the trip was very exhausting, and Alan agrees that a long journey is always bound to wear a person down. Evan grumbles that stopping at that labyrinth-like place along the way only made things worse for them. Alan tells him it could not be helped. Alan explains that all those stops along the way were preparation for the battle ahead that they have to win. He also picked up some gifts while they were at it. A flicker of worry crosses our boy's face as he glances at the gifts stacked in the carriage. He murmurs that he hopes Deus will like them. Alan mentions that it should be their turn soon to go through. Evan adds that the gate inspection should be easy after confirming their identities. Evan nods along and says "alrighty" in a relaxed tone. Alan keeps a calm and collected expression as he walks forward. He thinks to himself that if he is right about this, then things should go smoothly from here. Evan leans in with a troubled look and tells Alan that they have a problem. Alan blinks and repeats the word problem because he is caught off guard by it. Evan explains that the soldiers told them to come aside all of a sudden. He has no idea why they are being singled out like this. Tension fills Alan's eyes as a figure steps forward after the identity verification is done. The knight looks straight at him and asks if he is Count Palatio. Alan turns to face the approaching figure and his guard is immediately raised. The knight introduces himself as Viren the Fourth Gnorc and a direct disciple of Fiola the Master Knight. He stands tall in polished blue armor with the confidence of someone who has never been told no in his life. Alan's eyes snap wide open in surprise. He repeats the name Fiola and instantly recognizes the title. Alan asks what this is all about. He thinks to himself that he is very on edge right now. Viren explains that bringing the knights along is not the real issue here. He reveals that a friend of his from the kingdom of Ashtalon has a score to settle with Alan. Confusion settles over Alan's face as he furrows his brow. He tells Viren that he is not aware of any such thing. Alan goes quiet for a second, and then it clicks in his head. He mutters the name Carmine under his breath. Viren breaks into a wide laugh and tells Alan that he really knows how to get on someone's bad side. Viren announces that Carmine wants him to confiscate all of Alan's belongings down to every last piece. A crystal ball pulses nearby with Carmine's lingering fury inside it. A smug grin spreads across Viren's face as Carmine's voice declares through the crystal ball that the bastard is heading to Caliburn loaded with valuables. Viren chuckles and asks if all of this is really over just a small fight between them. Viren insists that Alan is missing the point of his appeal and presses him to accept the deal now. Viren shrugs and explains that his friend pays him well for this job, so he needs to take care of it at the very least. Dread settles over Alan and Evan as they notice rows of armed knights standing in formation on every side of them. The Fourth Gnorc soldiers have them completely surrounded. The guy stares at the formation and cannot believe that Carmine went this far after one rejection for no real reason. The pettiness is almost impressive to him. Viren tells Alan that if he hands over all the expensive goods in his carriage, he might let him go. His tone makes it clear this is not a real choice. Cold amusement flickers across Viren's eyes as he draws his blade and shifts into a combat stance. Viren declares that this is exactly what he was requested to do. Viren thinks to himself that he has nothing to lose here. Alan is from the kingdom of Asteria, which holds little influence in the alliance. Not to mention he has no connection to anyone in Caliburn at all. A calm, almost amused look settles across Alan's face. He thinks to himself that these people really are sticking to their own kind out here. Viren swings his blade at Evan without any warning. He tells himself that even if something goes wrong, his master will take care of the trouble for him. The strike lands hard, and Evan lets out a sharp cry of pain. Evan crashes to the ground and groans through clenched teeth. Pain twists across Evan's face as a sickening crack echoes through the air. He cries out in agony. Viren suddenly freezes mid-motion. He stammers and asks someone to wait, and his voice breaks with confusion. A figure moves in and strikes Viren 3 times in rapid succession. Bystanders cry out in shock at what they see. Cold fury burns in Deus's eyes as he seizes Viren by the throat. He demands to know what Viren thinks he is doing and snarls that he dares to harm someone important. Deus finishes his words with ice in his voice. He declares that Viren dared to harm his benefactor. Alan stands behind him completely speechless. Unfortunately, there is one thing Viren was not aware of at all. Rage burns through every fiber of Deus's body as he moves with terrifying speed. The truth reveals itself that Count Palateo is in fact the benefactor of Deus Macallion. Deus earned this bond after defeating Kurga of Snowfield in a duel. He became a hero across all of Caliburn because of it. Viren stammers in shock, and one of his knights gasps and cries out the name Sir Deus. The narration adds that Deus earned the alias Swordless. Terror twists across Viren's bloodied face as his knees buckle under him. The narration reveals that Deus also earned the title of Master Knight. Viren screams that Deus cannot do this to him. Deus responds coldly and warns that if anyone here tries anything. Deus shifts his gaze to the surrounding knights, and his eye gleams with killing intent. He finishes his warning that if anyone dares to move an inch from where they stand, Deus's Eclipse Knights step forward behind him in full dark armor. He tells everyone present to leave the rest to their imagination about what will happen next. Vir freezes one of Viren's knights in place as recognition hits him. He whispers that the knight standing before them is Deus. Deus stands over the beaten Viren and tells him to be thankful for the circumstances that prevent a killing here today. Deus lands one final strike on Viren and walks away without looking back. Deus does not let up, and his expression stays ruthless and cold. He slams Viren into the ground as the impact echoes across the gate. Our boy watches the one-sided beating and nods with approval, remarking that it is a good beating. Then a thought crosses his mind, and he trails off. Alan replays the moment in his head when Deus demanded to know what they were doing to his benefactor. The words linger in his mind. Warmth floods Alan's chest as the realization sinks in. He wonders if Deus really just called him his benefactor. He always assumed Deus had no interest in him and no connection to him whatsoever, but Deus completely considers Alan his own. Alan marvels that Deus never once sent him a reply letter in all these years, and yet the man went this far for him without hesitation. Alan fights back tears and declares that he feels like he has been rewarded for raising his kids all those years. Pure joy lights up Alan's entire face as he rushes toward Deus. He gasps and exclaims goodness upon seeing him up close for the first time. Alan grabs Deus and tells him that he has grown into a very handsome man. His voice cracks with sincerity as he says it. Alan begins to say something about what it feels like when your kid grows up. Evan tries to get a word in, but Alan waves him off and says he does not hear that right now. Overwhelming emotion washes over Alan as tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He thinks about how Deus bowed his head for a father from a foreign country. He wonders why his son is such a sweetheart and is deeply touched beyond words. Evan glances over at the ongoing beating and asks Alan if Deus is going a bit too far with it. Alan falls quiet for a moment. He mutters that this reminds him of something. A serious look settles over Alan's face as the thought finishes forming in his head. He remembers the fact that Deus is destined to become one of the 5 deadly sins. Deus walks away from the beaten Viren and approaches Alan. The bystanders and knights at the gate watch in stunned silence. Deus bows his head with respect and asks Alan to please allow him to guide him from here.